Yo, how's it going, folks? Welcome to episode 162 of the Simpa Life Podcast. Hope you're keeping well. Hope you've had a wonderful week. I have literally nothing in my notes for anything to talk about in this preamble. I have just been talking with today's guest, a bit back and forth there, and just saying that I would assume something would pop into my mind. It kind of hasn't. I'm not going to complain about the weather. What I'm going to tell you about, actually, this week, we're getting close to the DCCC first event of the season. By the time this goes out, actually, I will have made it public. We've got one of the legendary sound systems from the Northeast, Common Unity sound system. They're going to come along and provide us some tunes. Very much looking forward to getting Angus in the field. I've known him for a long time from back in the scene, and he's still championing the same mission, the same movement, and it's brilliant to see his consistency. It's brilliant to see his evolution. I can't wait to see the rig for the first time in a good few years now at this point, actually. And yeah, it's going to be a wicked old event. I'll include links below, folks. We're on our new Facebook page. I think we're now Durham CCC on Facebook. I think this is page number 5, number 6, something like that. We'll see how long it lasts. But yeah, I'll include the link to that as well. If you want to give us a like, help boost up the numbers, do appreciate that. One thing that's going to be a crossover as well. I'm needing to figure out some shit right now. But once I figure it out, I'm going to do something about hemp garden on the podcast. I'm going to hijack an episode of the Simpa Life, and we're basically going to talk about hemp garden, everything that they've done. I'm going to talk to some people, hopefully in permaculture, alternative agriculture, and sort of horticultural approaches that's outside of cannabis. And I know, weird, but I think it's important to draw some attention to this project because I think it is very much complementary to everything I do here at the Simpa Life, everything that we do at Durham City Cannabis Club. So yeah, a bit of a heads up of some things. The other one is still trying to get my German guest bolted down for a date. I am hoping, where are we, to get him this side of the election coming up on, I think, the 23rd of this month. But yeah, fingers crossed, I'll let you know as we get on with that. See, I did have some shit to say. Who knew it? All right, segueing on, introducing today's guest, who is appearing now for, I think, your 4th time. You're on episode 57, 97, 144, and now back for 162. They are a formulation chemist with over 2 decades and a bit now, ticking over. I'm just reading out the same bio I've had here for a while of experience in the UK hydroponics industry. They are a prescription cannabis advocate, scientist, educator, and consultant, and the current co-chair of the Cannabis Industry Council. They are Dr. Callie Seaman. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me. I think think what you would call me is vintage now. I think that's the word that we're now using, vintage.
Yeah, I think that's a good phrasing. We'll take that.
2 decades. Yeah, you're making me feel old now, mate.
Time is passing. Time is very much passing, whether we like it or not. Ever more the motivation to go and do something.
I'm glad you mentioned the hemp garden at the beginning of this because I've been following that on social media, and it is a brilliant initiative. And you need to talk about it more because I think you need to get that initiative going off around the country. I think that model that you've got going off there, you need to spread that around the country because we need more of this in this country, bringing communities together, sorting out the local spaces. I mean, when I walk down the road here, there's nowhere for kids to actually go and play. There's no fields. All the fields are fenced up, locked up, and are locked up at the weekend. It's like, well, that field we used to play on. Admittedly, on a Friday night, I used to go and drink white lightning on that field, but that's a whole different story completely. But the fields are locked up, so where are kids supposed to play? Or are they not allowed to play? Oh, do we have to go into the metaverse? Is that where they're supposed to play now?
Yeah, I've had some interesting conversations through this project. I'm trying to be mindful of there's some things in the public arena here, and there's some things I have to keep private until I've dealt with a few more correspondence. But I've been speaking with quite a few different stakeholders and people within the local area that are not attached to anything I've done prior or wouldn't normally ever consider themselves, in a space to speak to somebody like me. That are starting to recognise the arguments I'm making about these spaces because I'm going to get involved in another park up here that some of the councillors have kind of tried to push me towards, and I've kind of gone, this isn't an and or thing, I'll do both, thank you very much. And looking at this project, it's exactly that. It's on the back of quite a rough housing estate, and I'm like, you can either keep building this up for primary school kids that won't use it, they'll use it, for half an hour after school, maybe if some of the parents stop there, or you can make this a multi-versatile space and expect that, yes, some teenagers will drink alcohol in the park, they will smoke marijuana, they might even do some balloons. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's that's what we do. That's youth. You know what I mean? There's a little bit of distance between us. You did it as a kid. I did it as a kid. I know kids that are doing it as kids. I've got mates that are older than you that were old school rave heads. They did it as kids. There's a common thread here. And I think we need to really be mindful of, you are visibly excluding them from this spaces. I think I brought up maybe last week on the podcast that the African proverb of, I'm going to butcher this a bit, but it's along the lines of the village that excludes the youth, the youth that are excluded by the village by the tribe will burn down the village just to feel its warmth. And I think kids can viscerally see this, that you're saying, I hate everything you are, we don't understand you, as elder generations have said to younger generations since time fucking began. Whereas now there's this alternative space, like you say, this digital realm that they're retreating to, and it is hyper-violent, it is hypersexual, it is full of all the things that the parents are keeping their kids off the street because they're scared might happen to them. Not everyone is a paedophile, not everyone is a murderer, not everyone is a violent thug, not everyone is a thief or a... There are bad people or people that do bad things out there, 100%. But to assume that everyone is inculcates that child into the belief that out there is dangerous, meat space dangerous, online space safe.
It's that programming again. It's that programming
Feels
again.
like it, yeah.
It definitely does. But as I say, that project, mate, keep doing it. Keep sharing what you're doing. Every Sunday when I've seen that what you've done a bit more, it really does brighten my day. So please keep sharing that. And when you can speak more about it and, you can talk really openly about it, do. Shout from the roofs about it.
Yeah, 100%. Like I said, we will be going active in local press and whatnot, and really bringing in some different groups and diverse team of people to champion this, because as you say, like if I can create a pathway forward, this a blueprint, I want to give that to anybody and everybody, because as you say, any of my listeners now, you'll probably look out of your window and see a disused bit of council land around where you could do something. You could just put a small rockery, convert it into a more diverse, biodiverse area. You could add more plants and different species, perennial plants. You could look at what locally is native to that area and plant that in the thing. You plant more food bushes for like birds and things like that. The impacts that these things can have by being able to see green spaces, by being able to hear birds, it has a profound impact on the human soul. There is a study, I can't remember when the hell I've read this, but there is a study, and I can't remember how much longer, but people that live with trees in front of their properties, where they have the path and then trees and then the road, they live X amount longer. It's not just obviously that they're capturing the air pollution from the vehicles, but they seem to understand something with this. It's the same with people that ground or like touch grass, walk barefoot. People that spend time at the beach or whatever, having contact, deliberate, intentional contact with nature. And I think better than that, the feeling you say you feel wicked looking at it on a Sunday, I feel fucking buzzed alive when I'm uploading all those little pictures, because I've had like half a dozen conversations with complete normal people. I've got my high vis on and a fat joint in my mouth, and I'm, working hard, we're sweating, and they stop and they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well," and I tell them all about the project, and I've not had one single person disagree with it. Ever. The only negative comment I've had about anything from the cannabis is somebody, after having my spiel and all my usual stuff, is kind of go, we still, some people abuse it. And then as they're walking away going, well, people abuse sugar and fat and alcohol. And I just listed it, and he went, fair play. And that was the worst interaction I've had down there in many, well, the whole time I've been there. It's like 30, 40, 50, however many times I'm down there cleaning up and sorting it, I think the community element, like you said, I'm trying to bring cannabis consumers of all ilks, whether you have the lawful protection of a prescription, whether you medicinally use it, you identify as rec user, whatever paradigm you fit in, I want you to be back into society. It's that analogy that I always draw about, like, if we didn't have queer culture involved in entertainment, how shit movies would be, like how shit art would be. It's the same, like, imagine how good shit would be if all the cannabis people were openly back into those spaces, allowed and welcomed, that we could then proudly, every Sunday, imagine all the stoners that would want to do that. Because again, there's something cheeky about it. I've got my joint, but I'm cleaning up, knowing, I mean, I know the law inside and out, and I can handle myself in any given situation. But to then still have that thing of going, like, I'm being a bit rebellious, but I'm also cleaning up, which means when somebody comes up to you, it blows their mind if they come up and go, oh, you know what I mean? It diffuses the situation, and you feel like I've just been me, and they can't reject me for it. Whereas the average consumer, I imagine almost every one of the listeners to this podcast will have had that experience of somebody deriving them because of the way they smell. Somebody that just loudly made a comment. They're in a room or something, and so it was, it smells of weed in here. Or just does something absurd that just draws a, you know what I mean? That makes you feel humiliated. That makes you feel thrown under the microscope, and that you're social, like you losing social cachet or credit, as it were, just for being who you are.
It's the shame. That's what you're trying to get rid of, is the shame. And you don't necessarily need to be proud of what you're doing, but there's a difference between them feeling shame for what you're doing.
100%.
And something that you said about it is that you didn't want to make it exclusively a cannabis space. It was just a space that happened to be allowed to be consumed there, that it wasn't the primary focus of it. And that's how we normalize things. If we make it something that this is what happens here, that's still making it not accepted. It's not making it the norm. It shouldn't be something that someone turns their head at and goes, oh, that space you consume over there. It's, oh, that's just another one of them spaces that you happen to be able to do that. But there's all this going off here as well. We're learning how to grow veg. We're learning how, what plants are medicinal, as well as, dandelions, for example. They have so many medicinal properties. I mean, we bang on about constantly. There are so many other plants that we forget about that have got so many medicinal properties to them. And that's what could be taught in there. There's so many wildflowers that we've got here that are forgotten about. So that was the angle I loved about where you were coming from with it, that it wasn't going to be intentionally a cannabis space. Just happens that you're not going to be judged for using cannabis here. If you use it, you use it. If you don't, you don't. But we're all together.
Yeah, we are plant-powered people that are plant-positive.
Yeah.
I don't care what plant you use. There's people that know, as you very much know, I am not averse to anybody using anything, even if it is directly harmful to themselves. If they as an adult have chosen to do that and it doesn't directly harm or indirectly harm somebody else, fill your boots, mate. You want to be a Travis Pastrana and in a pair of boxer shorts jump from a plane into another fucking plane without a parachute? Do it. 100% do it. I love watching that video. You should be entitled to do that shit. Do you know what I mean? It's if we're then sentient adults, we should then be allowed these things. It's such a weird society. Like, did you see? So this is recent news. I'll make a note to include this below. So the president of Colombia has just got in real fucking trouble because in an interview he said, cocaine, it's not as bad as whiskey. And he's right. And that's the thing that bothers the fucking word. Wait, sorry.
Well,
okay.
No. Are we talking about the pure cocaine itself? Because drugs aren't dangerous. It's not what you're taking.
And that's what he's stating. So in his head, I guess what he's speaking to there is if then think of what's the Isle? Is it the Isle of Skye? And it's the whole isle just makes one whiskey. What's the whiskey called? It's in a short ass bottle. But one of the isles up there in Scotland, all they do is make fucking whiskey. The whole town, the whole people, everyone lives on there is part of the infrastructure of making that whiskey.
Is it Glenfiddich?
No,
I don't know.
I think it's a shorter name. I'm pulling it right from a long memory. But my point being that there's then this and then there's the story and the narrative around that. You go on the website and it's like, since 1000 and blah, 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 our people have... And the heritage and the history of that. Versus then the bootlegged whiskey that was produced in America that was poisonous and fucking killed people under Prohibition. And so then he's thinking, okay, that cocaine produced in that sort of factory, or the 2 billion a year that cocaine that is produced by Coca-Cola, like their sort of cocaine. It's not the kerosene kids in barefoot stamping down the leaves and using fucking grass. What do you call them? What the hell is that tool called? It's got the whips on the bottom. Trimmer? A strimmer to cut all the leaves and shit up. You know what I mean? They're not doing all of those. They're making do with what they can to get to the end process, because every precursor chemical, every other thing is then watched by these entities. And so, yeah, I agree then what's then cut down, and you've got it from your mate who got it from him, who got it from him, who got it from him, who cut it from him, who cut it from him. They're like, it is percentage-wise stronger than it has been for quite a while for the majority of people. Because the people that are close to source are getting fucking close to source. Because again, think of economics here, people. If you are the man that buys up the boat, the man on the boat isn't going to waste his time bringing an adulterant. He isn't going to waste his time bringing a cutting product. The weight is the weight is the weight. That boat is calculated to within a gram of its fucking life to carry exactly that amount of fucking cocaine. That is the purest they can get it from where it is. Yes, it's lost its purity in the production process, as we spoke, as a consequence of not being able to get product. Not everyone is a Walter White out there, but there are some very fucking smart people that are working on these reformulations. Well, as you know, as a formulation chemist. But yeah, once it then gets into the hands of, like I said, the distributors that are then cutting it and cutting it. Imagine if by the time you got your Heinz beans from Tesco, it had been like watered down 3 or 4 fucking times. You'd be like, well, no. But that was the only beans you could get. The Heinz people would still be trying to get those beans.
I think what's worrying me about culture at the moment and what is coming through is, have you come across pink cocaine? 2C?
Yeah, it's such a just a...
It's the wipings up. It's the sweepings up.
Basically, yeah.
You never know consistently what it is. It can be varying every time. You're not getting the same thing, and then it's coloured pink. That, to me, is a problem. That is not knowing what you're taking and it being different every time. That scares me. That kind of shit was not about when I was younger. That just didn't. That did not exist. I think it worries me as well as the amount of ketamine I'm now starting to see coming through. I now follow a lot of harm reduction videos, and there's on TikTok, I don't know if you're on TikTok, there's harm reduction Al, and he's ex-drug addict, and he talks very openly about what he does, and he talks openly about harm reduction and how to use things appropriately. And there was a lot on there that I was going, Jesus, I didn't know this, I didn't know that. He was talking about with ketamine about spitting, about that if you're snorting it, that not to swallow it, because it then crystallizes more. It then goes through your actual bladder and causes more problems. You just spit it out. You feel anything, taste anything, get it out. I didn't know this.
It's also sorry to add on to that. It's a lot of friends that pass the point of cultural use, social use into serious problematic use.
Yeah.
If you pass the point of being able to tell when you've dripped, the drip is the point where you feel it drop from the nasal cavity into the throat. You need to fucking wait to then redose.
Yeah.
You've passed the point of being able to effectively get where you are trying to get with that drug. You are now stacking on top of it. It's like when you've got MDMA burnout and the receptors just will not take anything in. And the reason you're having an advanced effect after the fact is the adulterants, is the amphetamine. It can break down the methyl part and still take the amphetamine part, but it was not going to have the euphoric kind of war pleasure. You're just going to get like a rush fizz, or like I said, if the adulterants in that are going to take you with it. But yeah, with the ketamine thing, like I said, there isn't the harm reduction advice around it, because it came very quick into culture, but it stayed in very nuanced parts of culture, free party culture, certain sort of techno scenes, very niche sub-music genres. Like then when it came around, it started to invade other areas, but then a lot of people on pills and say drum and bass, dubstep, etc., those kind of things, but it's a bit more high-end, energetic fucking thing. They decided to get this culture now, they'll push away the ket people, and it became this binary. And then again, that's that social exclusion we were talking about before, worsening and compounding the effects of it.
We do need to talk more about those harm reductions. We do need to talk more about these ways of taking it safer, understanding it. I think as well, I mean, what he was actually talking about on one of his podcasts was the fact that the price of it is the problem. It is so cheap that actually it needs to go up in price, so that the people who would normally, they would have X amount for the sesh. So they would have 50 quid for the sesh, and that would be their lot. Whereas they're getting mass amounts of it because it becomes so cheap, and actually ending up with more harm because that's so cheap, instead of buying other things. Yeah. And he was, I would go give him a follow. He's got some really good advice. Really good, open, honest advice about drugs as a whole, and respecting other people as well. That he was talking about, that hanging around in town and being in sort of, he'd got to this point, and he spoke about the drip, and he got to this point where, you know, he was looking at a real mess in town, you know, being, you know, ending up in a K-hole, and going, that's not a good thing. You've got to think about the people around you as well and be respectful of the community that you're in. Is that fair that somebody else is picking you up off the floor more, and you're causing a real mess. So he's very balanced in what he's doing. I was liking it a lot, liking what he's doing and what he's trying to sort of change that attitude that people are always going to want to get off their heads.
So did you see the thumb?
It probably responded to one of my thumbs. Don't know, did it? I didn't press anything.
I don't like what they're doing with all this shit.
It's AI. AI.
Yeah, wait, hope it'll learn something. No, I respect that. I couldn't help but smile for a minute there. The nostalgia of being, I've got 50 quid for the sesh, and literally in my head being like, oh yeah, so then it was like, and I was never really too asked about Ket. Maybe at the end of the night, you'd have like a line or two of somebody else's thing and just settle into that sort of thing. But usually start with alcohol. Alcohol's fairly cheap. All right, £5 beers, get a couple of beers to start going. You're like, all right, needs 10 bag maybe. Maybe if I'd actually get a Swifty, £7.50, bit of hash, that'll keep me going. All right, we need some, we need Baccy. So that was like what was it, 13.5 gram pouch of amber leaf, and it came with like the skins and the other bits, and that's sorted. And then you go sort of off to go 3 in on a bag of coke, and it's like, nah man, that's like 2 hours worth of fun. And we've got pills, of 5 for a tenner over here, or matey boys got some of the £10 Gurners in, and we're like, whoa, and just working out like this shopping list of shit. If like that is still everybody that goes into that culture, that is the collective experience, or distilled into its lowest point, the thing. And what used to happen was the evolution of somebody be like, I got really into MDMA. So they would then be like, wait, I might then become the man that gets the good MDMA. And then the way to get my MDMA cheaper is to get more of it. And you all want to have MDMA at night? Okay, I'll sort you out. And so it used to be this system of the person that really enjoyed and became a connoisseur of the thing could seek out the best of the thing, and the harm reduction of the collective that turn around like, oh, I found us the good drugs. And everyone like, yes! But then they started targeting that shit and treating that exactly the same as if you were out there cutting drugs and trying to sell them to 15-year-olds. Like, they didn't understand that actually celebrating, supporting the person that cared enough to go, I'm not buying that this week for you guys. No, we couldn't get any this week. Well, I could, but, I'm not buying that. Like, we had brown speckled hen pills for like 4 months up in the north. No one could figure out what the brown was. We all had our suspicions it was some, dirty brown tar heroin. Because you'd get, like, you go through and then you just get, like, heavy body. Like, psychological kind of gone, but just, like, heavy. And some people would, like, 3-4 weekends in and be like, learn the lesson. Please learn the lesson. Like when we had bombs with PCP in, and it just they just I think I've told this story on the podcast. I can't remember what episode. But like it leveled people across Durham. About 20 of us took them in one spot, and then we all separated out to go on our adventures for the evening, intent to meet at an event in the city later on, as we always did. And there was just this anarchy of people like ringing each other across the other side, like, what the fuck's happening? And like I found myself in the guy that I knew his house in like fucking Neville's Cross, and I was laying facing into his couch. And as a kid, on Windows 97, I had a Homer Simpson screensaver where he walks back and forth and eats stuff. Or he's got like, Marge has got the mower and she's cutting the grass. And I was just laying, staring into the couch, watching Homer go back and forth, like chomping the ice cream bits of the couch on Marge. It was the most like, what the fuck? But those kind of experiences we weren't trained for, because none of us were into angel dust. None of us. That's not really a UK sort of drug. It's like ice. It's not that many people.
It's becoming more prevalent, mate.
I know. I was trying to. Yeah, it is because of, unfortunately, and this is going to make me sound like a dick, considering I've just been celebrating the release of Ross Ulbricht, Silk Road founder. Dark net services and the internet and things make getting drugs a hell of a lot easier.
Do you know WhatsApp does? Have you seen the menu?
Telegram as well. Yeah, You used
to have to know someone, right? And it used to be a mission, right? You used to have to go, find them, pick that up. And, well, they'd only have that, so you'd have to go over here to get the other. It's there, everything, and they'll deliver. It's dialogram. And that, this accessibility does worry me with inexperienced users, because I'm coming across kids who are inexperienced, and it worries me the accessibility they have to it. It really does, and that the not having the such a, as I say, a mission to get what you're wanting. And not be sort of part of a community, or it's your mates have done it. So it's like, well, only have half of this, mate. First time, I'm with you. I'm your dropping buddy.
It's the escalation of things. Like I said, when we were young, it was Rocky. You started with Rocky hash or like tack, whatever your parlance you want to use. Very cut down grade shit that comes through Middle East, went through usually Holland, and just got very pressed.
So bad.
Very. Yeah, it was very, yeah. But that was our thing. And then obviously the more homegrown became a thing in Europe, especially in the UK, then sort of flower became more of an accessible thing. Amphetamine, really base fet, not all that strong in the grand scheme of things, that was often available quite cheap.
MDMA. That's because chemists stopped getting done and it stopped being prescribed. So you stop getting things like black bombers.
Ephedrine and stuff like that. What was it? The modern housewives helper, and they were prescribed for like dietary drugs and stuff like that. So, it was a big scandal with I'm going to say Weight Watchers, but don't sue me, Weight Watchers, if it wasn't you. One of those sort of entities, I think, got in some trouble for their attachment or association towards people that were supplying these things. But then, interestingly, now we have Ozempic and other similar drugs. So it's interesting how we find a use for this thing and it gets banned and then ends up being, the only people that can do anything with it are researchers in pharmaceutical labs, and then they come up with drugs that, weird. Anyway,
addictive. Huh? That are nicely addictive. That's a business model, isn't it?
It is. It's interesting. But my point being is that, what we had was at least consistent, and you did it together. And it was always, and there wasn't the same number of, you went to Matey Boy, he had 20 pills, but there's 15 years. Back in the day when you got chalky pills that broke apart and you double drop, when it was safe to do things like that, before the £10 gurner. And again, the same thing we were talking about with the cocaine on the boats. The reason we ended up with £10 gurners is we started doing people per number of pill rather than total content of drugs. So you'd usually get the chalky pills back in the day of fresh press. They would usually be your cheap base dried amphetamine, and then usually a crystal MDMA. And they were pressed in a way, usually somewhere 100 to 150, 180, depending on supply, or you're getting the Dutch imports. Then when the Dutch and the Germans really started going fucking they went, all right, if we put 300 milligrams in one pill, that halves the number of pills we make. And so that then became the phenomenon of, like I said, in our parlance in the north, we'd call them £10 gurners, gurning being the facial expression that one pulls when enjoying these drugs. Yeah, but the chalky ones were the shit, because you buy like 5 for a tenner. You and your mate would double drop 2 each. The bag would have some chalk in the bottom, and then you can maybe wrap that in bombs when you rip off like a bit of paper, and then you put it into that, so you make like a little pill pouch, as it were. And then you can half the other one later to just push you over the edge. Again, it wasn't then per se the MDMA, it was the amphetamine that was just keeping you going through the night, letting you dance a bit longer, letting you talk more shit in the park till 5, 6 in the morning or whatever. But it was the way we expressed ourselves under those drugs as well was very different. It was about erasing our social anxiety and our feelings of separation. We took these drugs to come together, to dance together, to cuddle, to sweat, to tell people that we loved them, to care about each other. Whereas this generation, as a consequence of the end stage of like neoliberalism and the late stages of capitalism and the selfish narcissism that's been celebrated through social media, through the influencer phenomenon. I know the irony of me doing this. Don't even get me started. But you know what I mean? That then it changes the relationship of it. So then this whole thing of DMT used to be a rite of passage in the you would be with certain older heads. You'd session with some people who were slightly older, and they'd watch you taking different drugs and have different experiences, and they kind of come to the fire tonight. I want to, do you know what I mean? And you invited in the experience, and you were kind of guided through it in a way that you still had some sort of respect for it. Like the fact that, and I enjoy having a DMT pen. Allegedly, I may or may not have enjoyed it when I was traveling around America, because it's quite easy to fly with, and apparently it's not tested for in airports. Not that I'm offering that as advice in any which way to anybody. But it's still a different experience than having the compound, than having the raw smell and it's getting on your fingers and the oil and making the pipe. And I may or may or not. I also have a very ceremonial special pipe that has been with me for a very long time. That whole experience, that connection to that thing, that when that box comes out, when that pipe comes out, when that setup is da-da-da,
Got a teapot like that.
it's a different fucking, yeah, it's a different fucking thing. Same, yeah, where people prepare mushrooms or whatever, or other different drugs in their own personal ceremonial way. Over time, you develop a way that allows you to best interact with these things in a way that gives you not necessarily what you want, but what you need in that moment from that thing. And just being able to go like break through on DMT, even just having the tech in your hand, it feels, I don't want to use the word offensive, but like it's unnatural. It's lost the connection to spirit, to history, to the barefoot tribesman. Like when I go do my psychedelic, I'm in the fire barefoot with the woods. I'm sleeping in those woods. I'm living in those woods. You know what I mean? I am back to nature. I've done it, yeah, quite a lot in my living room or in other spaces like that. It's not the same. It's not, and I'm not saying, oh, well, this is better and you have to do this. From my own personal experience, I found that doing it while also absorbed into nature in other ways gives you a much more profound sense of connectivity than this sense of just radical detachment to this other place. And I think these whole narratives of like aliens, entities, waiting rooms, all these other subcultural things that arise from it are in some way forms of still taking on our attachment to this realm with 90 degrees and concrete cages and flat floors and all the rest of it. You know, these things that are still so unnatural to the human animal that we can't, you know, it's in the same way as if like you take drugs on top of alcohol. It's not the drug experience, it's the alcohol plus drug experience. So I feel that you need to respect these things in those ceremonies. And again, like I said, the old heads would invite you around from like you'd be raving away at whatever, a free party, and they'd shout you over to a fire pit. It'd be a bit quiet around there and be like, what are you boys doing? They'd be like, have you ever heard of dimethyltryptamine? And you're like,
in my experience, I got called to a tent in the middle of the night, and what you're describing, and I left that field a completely changed person. And as you said, it's funny, you mentioned, you're talking about the old rave beds. Last weekend, I went to the wake of someone. I used to work with aquaculture, and I worked with his brother and as well, both of them together. And a lot of us all came together. Anyone who doesn't know what aquaculture is, was one of the original grow shops in Sheffield. It was the first one I ever went in 1995. It was down on Bramall Lane. My dad took me there. And that's where kind of my career and this all kind of started, was there. And it was more of being part of a family. And we were a family together, and it grew in size. And these particular elders, as you speak of, they were part of the original rave scene, the sort of, you know, the one before me. So they were the generation of Udbury. They were doing DIY down in, it was around the sort of the Derby kind of area. Mm. And what they taught me was to think very differently to how I thought, and just to have that kind of activism side. And I thanked, I'm not going to mention names because they were very private people, but I was very thankful for the influence they had at that time of me. And if it wasn't for sort of the interactions with them and the understanding of what they were doing and them teaching me, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. I would not have the balls to do what I'm doing or be going in that direction. And I thank this man for what he did. I mean, he was a character, and you would never forget him. If he was an absolute character, complete and utter character, but a heart of gold. But it just taught me so much, and it made me sort of think of this, of exactly what you're talking about, that generation above you taking you under their wing. And teaching you the ways of going, no. Don't do your FET first. You need to do your pills first, and then you do your FET later, or it ain't going to work. You know, those kind of little things of, well, if you're going to snort it, mix it with a bit of cow because it's going to hurt if you don't. You know, those little kind of, things. And
well, even just the respect element, because it's you're being passed down a torch, and you then look up to this person handing it down, and you go, I don't want to act an idiot with this. Do you know what I mean? It's that's what I'm saying. We are self-regulating species. I haven't made this argument in a while, but I do, or have done historically. I'm trying to think where I've written this. It's in an article somewhere in the myriad of things I've written in the world, which is not going to help anybody. But arguing about why cannabis pub. It's the thing of the idea of why a pub works as harm reduction, which is like, what? That's an alcohol access point. No, but prior to the supermarkets taking over and all of that shit and Tony Blair's disastrous attempt at cafe culture.
Oh, don't even get me started on that, man.
Yeah, yeah, there's many reasons. I've recently as well, I've very much hate that man, but that's a whole other sidebar, as you say. That was the point of like the bartender. You'd then have like the kebab shop, you'd then have a taxi rank, you'd have all this nighttime infrastructure. See what I'm doing here? I'm going to sidebar into something. See what I'm doing? I'm being smart. You'd have all this nighttime infrastructure that meant that you'd come out of the pub a bit sloshed because bars have gone, nah, man, you're a bit done. You know, Dave, the local, said, you should go home, John, you should go home. Go on. Then you stumble outside, fucking bouncers there. You all right, John? I've had a good night, lad. How's the kids? Yeah, it's good for me. Where you going? I'm going to get my kebab. Get you a kebab. You walk in the kebab shop. They're like, all right, Dave. Get your kebab. You get a taxi. You know what I mean? There's a whole thing looking the fuck after you in a vulnerable state, because that's what drunk is. To reference back to ketamine, as he said before, one of the things that makes me fearful most about ketamine culture is the number of young girls. Yes, young girls. I didn't mean, that's made me sound old. Young women, obviously, because they're all from maturation, but I mean teenage women that are taking the ketamine because of it, what it does to you, the physical sense of self, your feeling of being able to feel when you're touched, your ability to be able to get up and walk away, you'll be able to defend yourself. There are bad people in every area in society. I'm not saying that they're all more predominantly overly represented in this culture than any other culture. But yeah, like it worries me. It was something that Riley Kirk brought up last week that we were talking about toward the end of the podcast. Like, the reason legalization is so important in a feminist sense is the security of access, because as dudes, you don't really think of it. It's not just even the physical sense, it's the sexual violence angle, the potential of that.
Mate, if I went into the situations, the places I have been to when I was younger, and I look back at that and go, Jesus wept, what you would put yourself at such high risk. I didn't care at the time.
But at the time, you also had that bouncer, that bartender, that taxi rank, the kebab shop. There was the infrastructure, was the other people. And this is what we were saying about with digital supply, and that now that infrastructure is lost. And because they don't have somebody to go, oh, you got a bag of ket. A gram of ket is not the same as a gram of fet, is not the same as a gram of coke. Exactly. Like, and most people will, even regardless of what someone will tell you, because of differences, you have to learn it yourself. And again, if you've got, and this is going to be controversial to some people, I'm sorry, but if you've got your coke friend, your coke dealing friend, mate, and you go around and be like, I want a little bit, they'll, if they're a decent person, again, I'm maybe thinking back in my day, and I don't really keep contact with a lot of the people, you then wouldn't be trying to exploit that person and make a consumer of them. You'd want to then educate them into that space. And then if they're the one giving you it, you don't want to act a tit to them. Their experience, they know this thing. I don't want to now take this and go on like an idiot. So there's then this mutual, it's like the positive anxiety side of anxiety. I know society hasn't allowed that, but like the butterflies, the thing of worry that's positive comes into being to protect both parties, to then going, well, I don't want to fuck you up and send you on this trajectory of life. I want you, if you're choosing to do this because I'm doing this and I can't say no to you, you're a free adult, I want you to do it with the best intention. And I think that, like I said, that without that mechanism, and then without, again, like pubs and shit have got so... Let's circle back to where we're going. Pubs, nightclubs, and various other things have got so much worse than they used to be. In the 90s, there was a move when rave culture really took off and MDMA and pills exploded in the scene. A lot of the nighttime people kind of went, all right, fuck. What we're going to do is charge you 50 quid or 20 quid on the door because we know you're only going to drink fucking water. We'll open the fucking windows because you're sweating like balls in here as you're cooking. Here's your free water. Rave your tits off till 6 in the morning. Get the fuck out of here. And they adapted to it. And then what a lot of clubs maybe allegedly or did or didn't do was their bouncers and their crew started selling the drugs, and then it got to a point where that was fine, but then they started taking all of the drugs off people, so then there was only their drugs being sold, and then when it wasn't drug takers being involved in drug dealing, we lost the it's the same expression you'll have heard in the cannabis space, unfortunately. I just grow it, I don't smoke it. It became that with drugs. So then if you're selling cocaine and you don't take cocaine, you don't care what people think of your coke or what's in your coke. So this is why you need drug takers in these spaces to know what good drugs are, to help educate other people that no, this is a quality product, you can take a hell of a lot less. Because this is where we have the opioid epidemic and problem, is that people are getting a shandy one day and a fucking absinthe the next day in terms of a spectrum of strength. And so, yes, we've now evolved into where we are. It used to be like we had a smoke easy in Durham, like one of the pubs, we could smoke in the beer garden. And it had this cultural vibe of all people were connected. And so some would drink, some would smoke, some would do both. Some would do smoke one night, some would drink another night. Some would, we'd have a bit of jolly and we'd be bouncing around on chemicals or whatever. And there was this space of acceptance and people knew not to take the piss. Because again, you were around these different generations of your peers and you self-titrated this behaviour. Whereas now, like, I'm going to actually tell one more anecdote because it's funny and just came to my mind. One of my mates to talk of ketamine, he was a bit messy in a venue, and I'm going to keep this as vague as possible, in a venue in Durham, and two bouncers ejected him from the building, and upon ejecting him, decided to search his pockets. They found a bag of white powder. This individual was very fond of breaking his crystal into powder, so it was pre-powdered. Ketamine normally looks crystal because, like I said, it's cheap so much because you get the big bottles of liquid and, without explaining the process, you basically fry it up and
well, you cook it.
Yeah. So it results in quite a large amount of return, really, comparatively speaking. And these bouncers seem to have believed it to be cocaine, and
do you know what? That
did not complete their shifts.
Yeah, that deserves them right. I'm sorry, you see that if you're going to steal somebody's drugs, you deserve to end it. And that probably sounds very heartless, and I should be more understanding and more compassionate. No. You're going to do that to someone who's off the face already. You're going to steal their drugs for them and then take them. Mm-hmm. You deserve everything you get. Absolutely everything you get. Sorry, it's karma.
Yeah. They give him a hiding as well next time they saw him, which was really, really shitty. But yeah, my point is, again, without that tolerance of social spaces, where are we taking drugs? You're either taking them miles away from people where if you have a problem, there isn't the infrastructure to protect you. Like, touch wood, I've never had, and I've taken, maybe, allegedly, a lot of drugs in my lifetime. I've had some pretty fucking hairy moments, but I've never had a moment where I need to ring a professional. I need to ring service. I need some fucker, regardless of consequence, I need a person here.
I had to be that person the other week with someone. And that's what I think's worrying me. One of my son's friends, and I was really, really proud of my son because we speak very openly about everything. And I've told him a lot about, if you've got people who are the drinking, a common one is the speedballing that they do, where they've been on the uppers and the thumbs come out again. They go on the uppers and then they can't go to sleep, so they take sleeping tablets. Yeah. Well, I also know someone who died from doing that because basically your body, your heart can't cope with it. You've gone up, you're then told it to go down, and it just cannot regulate itself, and you die from it. And I've spoke openly, and I got again, I'm going to be as vague here as well because it's sort of it upset me a lot to find this person is a friend of my son's and was wanting help, and he was doing it daily and got him sent into a real state with it. And it's worrying how he was getting that and doing it on his own on a Thursday on 11 o'clock in the morning, and he's doing ketamine. And it's like, well, where have you got this from? How are you?
That is,
I've got this menu.
Again, that's a very valid point of, it used to be back in the day, you could get weed every day, like all day, every day. Like you could ring the weed man at daft o'clock and he'd be like, yeah, I'm watching Grandma's Boy at 3 a.m. If you can get a lift here, you can get the weed. Like that kind of, weed man was always open. But other drugs, like, you can't ring the chemical man on a Tuesday afternoon. You got to ring him Friday morning like everybody else and rush around like an idiot trying to get a hold of him because that's the time when he turns that phone on. Like, it wasn't a career. That's what I'm saying again. Like, we didn't have that over-glorification of career dealers in the same way that we had before. There wasn't this race to the top in the Scarface sort of sense of it. It wasn't because you didn't have Snapchat and social media and these other things to show off. Like, look at my fat stack. Look at the car. Look at us in Dubai. Look at my lady's new tits. A BB, but the backside thing is. Brazilian butt lift.
Yes.
Yeah, whatever, you know, do you know what I mean? That kind of aesthetic that has become a thing, the drug dealer lifestyle aesthetic of I've got more fucking money than sense. No offense to anybody that has got more money than sense. But yeah, because of that, nobody's just wanting to be like, oh, like, well, I've got my little bit. That's me. Oh, here you go. I'll sort you a couple out. Or if they are, it's done on such a small scale in comparison that it can't compete. So therefore, the majority of the product that is on the market is going through the hands of people that don't touch the product. So therefore, they don't know if they've got a bad product or not. And most people are still, unfortunately, in the headset of, well, I've never tried, you know, like, if you didn't have the good cut, and again, I'm sorry for people of how this sounds. There's so many people that are like, I'm just weed. Why are you talking about so many drugs?
It's the full subject here.
Yeah.
And you can't ignore it, and we do need to talk about it. And that's part of the issue, that it's just, they're dirty druggies. No, everyone has the right to do what they want.
It's all interrelated, and it's all going to happen anyway. And it's weird that we're bypassing that community element with the weed thing. And actually, before I go on with that thought, I want to circle back to the thing I've tried to land on twice there with the previous thought. Recently, you were invited to be on a panel for the Nighttime Industry Association discussing prescription cannabis and venues. So before we go away from pubs and what I was talking about community regulation, I think this is an apt time to have that bit of the conversation if we could. So could you tell us about your appearance, what was sort of discussed, your impressions of the event, and sort of actions that may come from it?
Brilliant event. I really enjoyed it. One, I got to meet UB40, which I, like from being a young kid, loved. But it was really, really good. It was really interesting because on the panel, we had two barristers on there talking about the law around it. And I don't know if you come across Sarah Clover, she's a barrister. And she was actually talking about how actually the cannabis law is quite schizophrenic. That in one breath, it's saying it's Schedule 1. But actually, it's a Class B drug. So Schedule 1 means it's got no medicinal use, but actually, sometimes we're going to call it Schedule 4. Mm-hmm. So hold on. So what is it? I mean, cannabis itself is confused in what it is.
It's everything but Schedule 3 at this point.
Yeah. So, and I thought that was a fantastic analogy to talk about cannabis as being the law around cannabis is quite schizophrenic. So there's no wonder nobody knows what to do or how to actually do this. I mean, we were both at Product Earth. It got shut down. Now, the problem wasn't the cannabis. The problem was the smoking. And this is what we actually spoke about there. That it's actually the method of consumption that's an issue and the insurances that go there.
Which it's like licensing pressures. If there wasn't the fear of the consequence, the smoking isn't a problem. That venue... Yeah, got its license renewed. Sorry, I was just like reading through a news article as fast as fuck in my head that it did get its license renewed recently, but there's still some contention around its future. But that venue has industrial-powered smoke machines. They came round security telling us at the day going, oh, if you all keep smoking in here, it's going to set off the fire alarms and we're going to have to get it down and it'll set the sprinklers off. And I'm like, I know what this venue's used for. What do you turn it off? You can't just go turn it off. How do you have these giant machines creating what you create in there? And you're telling me nobody is smoking in these venues when you've got 10,000 people packed in there side to side? Like, I get it's the pressure and the optics and everything else attached to it. So I don't necessarily think it's the consumption method. Like, the consumption method is the problem, but it's not because of the consumption methods. It's because of the prejudices against and the overemphasis, I would say, on other consumption methods.
But I've spoke to you about this before. I don't like standing on a train station and I walk into someone's vape cloud that's, strawberry, whatever it is. I think we need to be considerate about.
How would you feel if that was MCT and strawberry flavour? So it made a small, very almost invisible. So because again, that's VGPG, vegetable glycerin. I can't remember the chemical composition of the other one. But they're designed for the thickness. They're designed to make that cloud for the optic, effectively. It wasn't. It was designed to emulate and replicate smoking. So you felt when you blew it out, etc., psychologically, psychosomatic, it made you feel like you got the relief. But then it became this thing of, oh, I have more and I do this. And people making now this YouTube channels with hundreds of thousands of followers on that do vape trick shots. And they make like rings in shot, and they do all sorts of crazy shit with it. And there's competitions of biggest vapor, and then there's people that like make like giant. It's a whole subsection of culture, and bless them to it. But if they're allowed to do that, and that is completely at this point effectively unregulated, and it's down to, well, if it happens, it fucking happens, and we'll deal with it later. That should be the approach with other substances, as we were talking about with Riley last week. And I'm getting back on at the back end of the year about the unique pharmacology of the chemistry of cannabis smoke. And I agree with the thing of personal space. I don't think it's the problem of the product. I think it's the respect of the other space.
Yeah,
I agree. You shouldn't be consuming that. If you should then go somewhere. I think a drinking of something and eating of something is very different. Like, but then it's about the respect of the thing. So you can stand there and drink alcohol, and I've got no fucking problem with it. I don't necessarily like the smell of it. It is very rich, and people do, after they've drank 4 or 5 pints, they sweat alcohol. It is a very potent smell for someone that doesn't consume alcohol. But I excuse that in the same way if somebody was stood in front of me with really bad BO, I wouldn't. Who the fuck am I? Why would I ever say anything to them? Like, do you know what I mean? Why would I hold anything against? That's just who. That's what it is. What it is. They are what they are in that moment. I can't then have this prejudice against them. If I do, I'm entitled to it. Obviously, I'm entitled to my little head thinking whatever the fuck it wants. But to act upon that, or to then make the other person feel uncomfortable about it. But again, this is where the etiquette of society, I feel, has kind of been eroded in that everyone should act entirely freely within their own homes. However, 100 billion% who you are, the weirder, whatever you want, don't give a flying fuck. But then there's a certain thing where you park a percentage of your personality at home to go outside for respect of others. Yeah, literally. And that's what I feel is missing. So the guy vaping on the platform, you're being a bit of a dick. Like most train stations now, you can the platform is either massive, so you could go to the end and have a little cheeky. And I'd say again, no problem with that. I think even you should be allowed to smoke a cigarette up there. Call me crazy, you know what I mean? If you're a good fucking 100 yards or whatever up that side, or then the side door of access or what, it's the infrastructure then becomes the problem because it doesn't replicate human behaviour. And this is what has happened with pubs and drugs and nightlife. Is it used to be quite accepting and welcoming, going, actually, I can see by your eyes you're pinned, but you're being respectful and joyful. Like, I remember an evening where, can I hide your identity in this? Yes. One of my mates used to work travelling with bands around the world and stuff. And so he started work in the O2 at Newcastle. And so it was big in the security, all the teams. I went to go see Placebo there one year and double dropped. Ooh, I was Mr. Love and Joy. And I've been kicked out of so many venues for going out and smoking joints and coming back in. You can't count them. It's hilarious. And they'd just installed barriers outside, so you couldn't get out to thing. And normally my excuse, I'm just going to go to the cash machine, I'm just going to blah, blah, blah. And I just kind of went to spot a joint in the corner, and this lassie security guy came, rah, rah, rah. And I don't know what the fuck happened, but like 10 minutes later, she was my best fucking friend. She fucking ignored the shit out of it. Like, it was before prescriptions, before any of that law change or anything like that. Managed to just talk her into being like, whatever. And then every time it was coming out and fucking like being cheeky, like, just like, and it was just, again, that tolerance, that certain sense of acceptance. Like, I can remember that more. I can feel the joy in me still from that evening. I can't necessarily remember much fully about the evening. I remember bits of Placebo's performance. But the thing I remember is that sense of validation and acceptance of walking out knowing she's the head of security, knowing I'm smoking a fucking joint. And then at the end of the night, like, because I remember a week later, the guy messaging me going, what the fuck did you do with this thing? Like, in a positive sense, being like, this woman fucking loves you. Like, just some middle-aged sort of wifey. And I remember as I left, giving her a fucking cheeky little hug and that. And being like, oh, I'm good. And then off to go get my train. And nowadays, you couldn't even begin to do something like that.
I know, but talking to a lot of the venue owners there, they don't want to refuse people. They don't. They are just scared of losing their license.
That's right, yeah.
Difficult climate at the moment. They're losing customers constantly. People are now. I mean, the lockdown. A lot of people. I mean, I've got loads of friends who built bars in their back gardens. They've got a far worse alcohol problem now than they actually had just going to the pub, because there was, the cost of the alcohol reduced down the amount that you were actually consuming as well. So they were very, very open to this. They just needed to make sure that they were not going to lose their license. They weren't going to have police turning up at their venue going, "You're allowing this, we've got to shut you down, we're taking your license away, we're revoking that." Yeah. So it was a very, very positive experience. And we sort of, spoke about, contact the venue, see if they've got areas to be able to smoke in. They want not smoking, so vape. If it's a prescription, must be vaping. It's not allowed to be smoked. No combustion allowed. However, I was speaking to someone, I'm going on a bit of a tangent, and you were talking about the vaping being safer. I don't know. I was talking to someone, it was last year at ICBC Berlin, and he was talking about a study that I am sure he said Johnson & Johnson did, but don't quote me on that, and please don't sue me if it's incorrect, that they actually did a study on vaping and the effects of this, and how they described what actually was happening with vaping. When you light a candle and wax becomes liquid, and then you put your finger into it, and you take your finger out, and it encapsulates, and it's all covered in wax. Well, apparently this is what happens in your lungs with the alveoli when you vape, because of the actual, you're not heating it up, it's not combusting, it then cools on the actual lung surface and coats the lungs in a oil or a sort of encapsulation, which was actually causing more damage than smoking itself. So is vaping a better thing to do? Is it or not? I don't know.
If it is Johnson & Johnson, with 30 seconds you watched me there of Googling.
Yeah.
Johnson & Johnson's Nicorette, so Nicorette is nicotine replacement gum, becomes world's first licensed vaping and smoking cessation therapy. So is Nicorette also... they make a quick mist, so I think that's the spray. So maybe Nicorette do a vape. But maybe they're not doing the vape side of it and they're doing the other... I'm just saying, there's so many studies. There's obviously a schizophrenia one that's just come out of Canada recently that's very flawed. I mean, most of these are in their nature of causal versus casual relationships of things. But in terms of the vaping thing, I'm not going to throw these people under the bus. Many years ago in Glastonbury, I was waiting to go on stage, not a Glastonbury festival, a hemp fest in Glastonbury, very much smaller festival, a lot more, probably the same amount of hippies.
That's middle class.
Huh?
That's middle class?
No, way more, actually. The hemp crew, quotes hemp people are like. And I was waiting to go on stage, watch somebody else sort of go, and I was talking to one of the partners that was involved in their organisation. Again, I'm trying not to throw them under the bus. And they were telling me about a study that they'd read and were quite concerned about. But the way they were telling me about the study was not that they were concerned about the information and what it meant, but they were concerned about the information becoming public. The study was around volatility of botanical matter and bioactive and chemical constituents and what do they call them? What's the process when it goes to the chemical change?
Decarboxylation.
No, it's not, as in the word for the whole process, not a specific process. But the study was basically on botanical... Maybe I can't pull it out of my ass. The study was basically on botanicals, the vaporized versus combustion. So they were looking at crack and things like that. It was basically a whole study of consumption of different drugs through different means and matters. And one of the things that they found within this was around sort of fungal spores, around contaminants within a vaporized product, that slowly taking it up and volatilizing it gradually it activates certain biological contaminants versus then combustion at an eviscerative point. Granted, as Riley was explaining to us last week about when you smoke a joint at the top, obviously you're getting combustion, but then the heat is passing through and giving a form of vaporization, but then that's caught up by the combustion sort of So you're getting a mix of the things, and obviously it's then converting into oils, and you're getting the concentrate effect.
Was this an Aspergillus niger, which is an endophyte that lives between the cells of plants that you're talking about with these fungal spores they don't do any harm to the plant, but when inhaled and if they're not heated up high enough, they cause damage into the lungs and can start growing in the lungs.
Is that like the overgenus of, because the one that I'm thinking is aspergillosis?
Have I pronounced it differently? Aspergillus is how I pronounce it.
Maybe you know me, I read more words than I hear, so the way I pronounce them is often very much wrong. But yeah, I think it's one of the main side effects of it, or associated side effects to it, is temporary psychosis or like cognitive impairment. Because it was one of the things that was looked at a different study about, well, is that why street weed makes you crazy? And they just couldn't find correlation of high mold in so-called street supply. But yeah, so there's that sort of thing around it. There's then with the temperature at which you're breaking down different chemicals and components. I think a lot of products at the minute, is in like Volcano, Mighty, etc., are set to a certain temperature ceiling when there are still more chemicals that come after. Again, as Riley mentioned last week, there are certain compounds that can then only be created through, what is this word I'm looking for? It's not synergy, synthesis, it's some chemistry term I can't pull out my ass right now.
And now I'm sort of going, I should know this, but I don't know the words you're thinking of.
I can't even grasp it. It's in there somewhere. But yeah, through this process, it then creates these other things. And it's something to be studied. It's obviously it's something that Riley is looking into, and the team that she's working with.
I absolutely love Riley's work, and I would love to be able to work in her laboratory. They've got so much more freedom than we've got here in this country. We just would not be even able to set anything like that up. It just, impossible to. Well, no, sorry, not impossible. It would
be made as close to impossible as possible.
Yeah, and the reality is how much of a money drain it would be, and how quickly, because anything like that, someone willing to invest in that, they're going to want a return of investment in it. So what am I getting out of this? Oh, you're going to tell me that actually this is bad for me? They don't want to know that.
Well, yeah, it's so in the States, I think the reason that a lot of drug research, and let's put my little tinfoil hat on here, I think the reason that we're seeing problematic youth use, in fact, problematic use in a lot of different demographics, is, again, with my little conspiracy theory here. Don't take this too seriously, but it does feel like we're a live laboratory. That if you are Johnson & Johnson, who I know have produced a drug called esketamine, which is a ketamine patented nasal spray, would you be too bothered about having all of these people taking ketamine and all these universities and academic institutions and that studying them, and then creating consumers, creating, narratives, and having, newspaper articles written about Wall Street ketamine's dangerous, but our ketamine's good ketamine, and you should pay for our ketamine. And
well, that brings us on to synthetic cannabinoids. Beauty onto that. And when I was at uni, when I was doing PhD, there was the WIN 54, which is a synthetic cannabinoid. Now, how these differ from phytocannabinoids, this is all to do with their relationship with the endocannabinoid system. So you've got agonists. Now, they're something that interacts with a receptor. So you've got THC, which is a partial agonist. So it goes into the CB1 receptor, it sits there, tickles it, activates it a little bit, and doesn't, you obviously get your euphoric feeling. CBD, which is the other phytocannabinoid, is an anti-agonist. So it goes into the receptor, sits there and goes, I'm going to tell you to do the opposite of this. However, your synthetics are full-bore agonists. So they go into the receptor and they make it fire and fire and fire and fire. And this is part of the problem with them. It's causing this overfiring of the receptor, and it hangs on in there and causes a much more increased effect of it. So this is the sort of part of the problem with the synthetics. I mean, we've got HHC coming through, THCP coming through, just to name a few that are there. I mean, when I was in the Czech Republic 2 years ago at Cannafest, really good actually, really good one to go to if you get an opportunity. Prague is a beautiful city, but this had very much a family feel to it, this trade show. So I'd highly recommend it. Saw families walking around with prams with the kids. They were integrating this into... from a younger age. There was a very, very different kind of attitude there. But I was shocked at the amount of vials full, I mean, when I say vials, jars full of THCP, HHC, and it then being sprayed onto flour. And do we actually know the long-term effects of these? Is the overfiring of receptors a good idea? I have more worry about these. Nature does seem to produce molecules that mimic molecules. You've got things like phytoestrogens produced. So I'm well into my phytoestrogens at the moment, using sesame seeds, pumpkin seeds, using sunflower seeds as well to help control my cycle. I'm at that point in my life where we're at the other end of it and it's going a bit fucking weird. It's, we're talking about perimenopause more. And we do need to talk about it. So support any woman who's in her 40s. She ain't insane. She's just going through this change where she's running out of estrogen and proestrogen. So, but nature itself makes molecules which mimic our own hormones that are made, our own endocannabinoids. Surely that's going to be better than something we are producing ourselves. And it's not. There's not been that kind of natural evolution of it. I have really big worries. I mean, there's been a big problem in Worksop with spice, and this kind of zombifying it's doing, and this sort of almost weird, not stoned like feeling. I mean, I've never tried it, never touched it, so can't really comment on what it feels like. So I don't feel I've got that experience too. But what I've seen it's doing worries me, really does worry me. And will that open up more chance of addiction or dependency, with it being, it is hanging on to the receptors more? There's a lot of questions that we need to investigate more. There needs to be more. And it sort of told us that, it's legal. It's all right, it's legal.
Yeah. I mean, good point that you brought up. As I said, I'm going to try and read it again because in my brain, I think Czechia, I think, is their rebranded name. I think rather than sort of Czech Republic. I don't know whether that's because they're not a republic. They haven't suddenly taken on a monarch. I think they just wanted to rebrand. I think Turkey did the same. There's now a spelling with two E's maybe at the end. And there's a slight variation on the pronunciation.
There's an accent over the U and Turkey.
Yes, I think it is slightly altered the pronunciation. But anyway, my point being that they've created, what did they call it? The Psychomodulatory Substances Act, which I think is quite interesting so far as we discussed before we started recording, Crantham and what they're describing as low THC cannabis, including flowers, are in that listing. So this is something that goes alongside of the existing narcotics listings, which are a lawful requisite under being a member state of the UN under the 1961, 71 and 88 conventions. Whereas these substances, under the way that Czechia, how we're pronouncing this, I'm sorry, are trying to schedule it, is basically going, okay, they modulate psychoactivity. They're not psychoactive in the same way that you take acid. I think there is, I can't remember how low the percentage is in the population, but there's a certain thing of a marker, same with DMT, a very small percentage of people that it just doesn't quite go there. It doesn't, same with like edibles, how some people don't get affected by cannabis edibles. But most of these things will have a standardized, you take this sedatory, you take this tripping, you take this accelerated heart rate euphoria, you take this, etc. And they're trying to figure out this thing, and I think that's going in tandem in tandem with them reforming their prescription cannabis laws and their rules. I think their patients, as I was flicking through before, I think is around, like 8,000 at the minute. They reckon it'll get up to about 20,000 plus. And I think they're just trying to figure out the laws so you don't end up with potential problems like Germany's looking slightly problematic at the minute in terms of the law has meant that cannabis isn't a narcotic anymore, which has freed up the pharmaceutical industry, the prescription cannabis industry. Yet there's only one club that's kind of finished one crop, or effectively that much. That's the one that I've seen in Berlin. So there isn't that other supply. So everybody is now a patient. Everybody just goes, oh, bad back, fucking gives you a thing, and you order it off the internet. It's just people, like you said, they go into a menu. So it's both sides of the lawful divide follow the same playbook. It's a capitalist, neoliberal, greed is good, Gordon Gekko kind of fucking model. And we as the community of actual consumers, we need to champion for these third spaces. I think what happened the other night on the Nightlife panel by being invited and with them accepting prescriptions is one step towards it. I hope that moves towards, if they see a patient smoking, maybe their vape broke, I don't need to talk to them. If I smell cannabis on this person, I don't need to ask if they've got a prescription. That's where I want to get to, because under the Equalities Act 2010, and I'm still waiting for a solicitor to try this, but there is a very interesting interpretation, so I'm going to chase up this Sarah Clover barrister.
Find me afterwards, and I'll do an intro to her.
Appreciate, because I want to see this get tested, because it theoretically says that if a cop smells cannabis, they should assume it's a prescription. So effectively now, the smell of cannabis should be enough to diffuse these situations, because then if an officer is stopping somebody in a vehicle and going, it smells of cannabis, and then running through the inappropriate sections of the Road Traffic Act 1988, then this puts them liable for falsely detaining this person for then...
The problem is, though, we're still seeing it, there are still police who do not even know that prescription cannabis is something.
Yeah.
And then we've still got that issue. And again, it's back to that confusion, that classification of it. Mm-hmm. Cannabis itself is confused and going, I don't actually know what I am. Am I a medicine? And in some ways, we need to downplay. I've been thinking about this of maybe we need to actually downplay cannabis and its potential so that it just gets accepted as just another thing. It hasn't got all of this magical purpose. So it can't be then, we need to paint in that because it's got this magical purpose and we can make out of it.
100%. But the reason it's got this magical purpose isn't because it's us lot going, it's magic. We're very fucking realistic because we've lived it, we've experienced it, we've worked to champion and fought within this space. You know what I mean? It's the people that need it to be magic so that it can also be dangerous. It has to be so magical that only us in our little suits and our hairnets and our fancy pictures in the Daily Mail and our article going, our magic medicine for the children, alongside, these terrible Albanians, foreigners coming into our country. They need that binary. That's the only way the industry is going to exist for them.
You've picked the wrong group there to
look, I wasn't picking on any group. That was vague enough that it could have been anybody.
Yeah, look, the something I talk about, obviously, I've been in the hydro industry 20 odd years, and I have seen there is not one archetypal grow. There is not. There's not one stereotypical. There are people I've walked into my son's playground, and there's another, I know who you are. You know who I am. Yeah. And you cannot pinpoint them. There's just not. But there also are a lot of nasty people. There are a lot of people who are people trafficking within that. And that is what needs controlling and needs addressing. And what I'm now wanting to champion is patient self-sustainability. Grow your own. That you should be allowed to grow your own and produce your own and, swap a little bit with a friend. So they've got something that, they're only, growing 1-2 plants. They might have something that's better for the day, or they may find that helps them with their, endometriosis better.
Maybe they just want something different.
Yeah.
we know that they call it strain lock, but I didn't want to champion last week. I have seen a comment somewhere of somebody being like, why didn't Simpa say cultivar? Cultivar or chemovar to Riley instead of fucking
strain.
But yeah, it's the parlance of then cultivar lock or whatever. The science is still emerging that is pointing toward that direction. That continually stimulating that receptor, as you were saying, with the same thing, creates a tolerance to it. Whereas if you can hit it, especially with a different variety and bouquet of terpenes and flavonoids and other things within it, it keeps your endocannabinoid system guessing, so you can keep your tolerance low by having a larger variety, which is one thing the clinics are missing. I know 4C Labs, I think temporarily, or were trying to introduce 3.5s, which I thought was a really good idea in terms of cultural representation and of allowing people.
Does pharmaceutical cannabis need that? What we need.
It depends what it's trying to do. If pharmaceutical cannabis, I think, and we've both spoken on the podcast, and this is about going into some contentious areas, and I love this as always. I don't think flower should be considered a medicine.
I'm with you.
Like it should be it's medicinal. Because it is. Botanical products, when taken by person, medicinal. The reason it becomes medical when it falls under this is under licensing issues. So it's, again, the issue with the bad people in cannabis growing. The reason they're doing that is money to be made. But if everyone that could did, and they helped out the other people because they were nerds and loved it, if all the grower Daves were still here and not fucking had their lives ruined for decades, you wouldn't have these big gangs, these multinational groups that are making a fucking killing off this. I guarantee by 2050, Albania is going to be a drug... If the world goes for legalization under a capitalist model, Albania of 2.5 to 3 million people is going to become one of the richest nations on the planet because they have the networks, the experience, the salesmen, because they've been allowed to do that. And culturally, when they take that money back, they go, cheers, lads, put it back in the coffers. So
that's not what is the issue at the moment. The Thai stuff that is coming in.
Yeah.
Becoming more of an issue, I'm hearing.
Can we park Thai for a second? Because that is where I wanted to go through the thing, but I wanted to, in this niche moment, talk about NHS.
Yes.
Because, there's campaigns, and I do support them in principle, but the more I am quiet in my life and have those moments of going, joy, something pops into my fucking brain. And the thing that's really been popping into my brain recently is... not the people that are championing it or the organizations, that's not what I'm accusing here, but is the vehicle, the vessel of this that is then being occupied by these people, being pushed by what I call the medical cannabis industrial complex as part of the global pharmaceutical agenda to privatize the NHS. And so I worry that if we start doing reimbursements of flowers, if we start to be able to give people 120 200 grams of flour a month on the NHS, and that being supplied by these for-profit companies, but then subsidized by all tax. I worry about the future of that model. I agree that then medication should be, but then I worry because, as we just spoke of sort of earlier with Medcan, there are hundreds of families that 6, nearly 7 years into this have not got access to the things that they can get illicitly or in an unregulated sense or through self-sufficiency. I worry that I love the NHS in principle. It has saved my life. When I think of who I have been and how much I abused it when I was a self-harmer, when I was someone that didn't, I was one of those kids. I was one of those kids and worse, way fucking worse. Yeah, I think of who I'm growing to be. I think of the person that I continue to grow to be. I wouldn't have without that service being able to prop me up. And to think that would be paywalled. To think that what I'm now going through with my autism assessment and waiting 3 and a bit years, whatever the hell this is totaling out to be. We need to streamline that shit. And I think the way to do that is to almost look at this Czechia sort of response of an idea. And I would argue put cannabis in there. I would argue put the botanical forms of drugs. I would even go one step further and shit, if you want to say like opium and shit, like anything that's the botanical derivative of the drug.
I believe that the concentrated forms need to be controlled a lot more. I believe those but
not unavailable. More controlled, but not unavailable. No. Yeah, agreed.
I think we need to. I think that we're going to see a lot of problems coming through. And I was talking to someone the other day who had been dabbing every day, concentrates every single day, and it was up to 1 gram a day. of concentrate.
That's rookie numbers to some of the guys I know up here, man. It's an epidemic of people that really get into dabbing.
Yeah, but they had problems with this hyperschemia, so they were throwing up. So what they were finding is that there's been an increase in this, and people being admitted to hospital with this throwing up sensation, the oversaturation of the endocannabinoid system.
This cannabis hypermesis syndrome.
That's the one, yeah. Again, pronouncing things wrong.
I might be wrong. This is the thing, like you said, we're both book learners, not orators.
And I was a bit sort of skeptical around this, and so spoke to someone who'd suffered from it, and she could only now have a joint on an evening. She'd had to completely stop. She'd had to, get her tolerance back up and her actual endocannabinoid system rebalanced again because she'd oversaturated it. So there's these kind of issues that are starting to come up with particularly highly concentrated things. And that is where I think we're going to see more of the issues.
100%. We've also got issues of it. This is going to annoy so many people. we don't talk about it, but we need to. Lipids and fats.
Yeah.
In smoking and combustion, through curing process and whatever, and then decarbing and other chemical modulation of the chemicals as it's combusted and then consumed, they're not issues. The issues are then benzenes and other consequences of the carbon being combusted. That complex chemistry is where we get the potential. Then we've got potential benefits in, lung protective qualities, like it's a bronchial dilator. There's qualities of certain cannabinoids that help towards the lining of the lungs. There's other things that are anti-tumoral, anti-canceral, etc. So that kind of all balances itself out. With these things, again, if you were introduced to when dabbing was the thing when it first came out and it was hot nails and all this whole shit back in, there was two types of people. There was the people that were still just like, just do it, and you're fucking killing your mates at 300 degrees, just and everyone coughing and I can't breathe, can't feel myself, and that was deemed to be that was deemed to be a good hit, as it were. And then there were the people who actually, and they started championing glass and cooling it down and timing and this and that and this device and that, and they were trying to reduce the harms of it. But the supply that then ended up in the majority hands, could be really shit product because you wouldn't know, as we were talking about before, because then a lot of the people that started to go into dabbing were making it with trim and other byproduct. It was just another way to make extra fucking money. The connoisseurs and the crafters of this country especially disappeared fast because the jobs are everywhere else. So why the hell would you not? I'm not saying all the people that stayed are bad. That's not what I'm saying. There's some brilliant people who are extractors in this country that do fucking hard work and produce quality product. But then there's a big space for non-quality product to step into. We see that with flour, like you said, that, this is an industrial CBD hempy thing imported from fucking, pick a random European country, and then sprayed with one of these things to be psychoactive, to then always just weed. If you then don't know weed, you go, that looks amazing, I've seen on Instagram, hard buds, looks like this, yeah, man, smells like something, that means it's good. And then, wow, dude, give me such a head buzz, like, wow, that's amazing, like... And that's what you'll then chase as good weed. Same with the dabs. That's what you'll chase as dabs. And it's fine. Again, it's the thing we see with alcoholism. We only ever really call alcoholism when it's the lower classes. Because it's only when you can't afford it becomes a problem. So I see, and I'm sorry, people, I respect yous, but there's some people out there I know who've got more money than fucking sense. Unbelievable money, more than fucking sense, and they can just go, all right, give me 6 grams of that, give me 2 of that, and we'll get a video out, let's do a couple of grammars away. And like you said, I worry that the overstimulation of it, I'm trying to pull like the analogy of like you've got a 1.2 fucking Ford Fiesta, and by taking cannabis, you're putting in some octane fuel, you know what I mean? You've put in like an air intake and that you've sped up a bit and it can handle it. This is like putting a fucking jet engine in it every goddamn day, and you're wondering why then it won't run the same, why the axle can't take it, why it's over fucking spinning, there's too much torque. It's to lead back to the synthetic cannabinoid receptor antagonist, the SCRAs. It's the same thing that I worry about what's happening there. But to them people, they've never consumed cannabis. They've never interacted with it. And I think the reason we end up with like zombified things is, again, the thing that we're not really talking about, that we're not allowed to talk about, partly because of the popularization of the CBD industry, is proliferal psychoactivity along other neurological pathways. So the number I'm quoting is Christ, going to be nearly 10 years out of date probably here, but I think it was the last time I looked at this, and like nearly a decade ago, it was probably about 23 to 25 different proliferal pathways and that CBD alone worked on in a psychoactive capacity. But because it wasn't THC and euphoric and high in that sense, it got classified on the binary, as we do in the modern fucking world, that's non-psychoactive. But I think these SCRAs are triggering something on other pathways. There is very little study publicly, because I guarantee they're designing drugs, of opioid and endocannabinoid receptor interactions. There's very little layman's information out there. If you really dig into some journals, you'll find quite a bit of stuff. Granted, I'm quite learned. Like, I'm an autodidact, is that what you call it? Someone that's self-guided in their learning. But fuck me, yeah, I can't get it into my head. It's just so dense. I need to know so much more that I don't know about basic and intermediate and academic chemistry and science.
That is.
Well, yeah, they use the language to obfuscate that they don't almost. It's then they go, well, we theorize, and so you're just like, whoa. And the models that they show in the processes, I try to get into to almost verify their own data, and I'm like, I can't get my head around this. So it, to me, says the fact that there isn't then this common idea of why we're not looking at these interactions, because we all now know things like, yeah, to go back to ketamine harm reduction advice, don't drink alcohol and take ketamine, people. Pick one or the other, please. Other drugs, I'd say don't polydrug use with alcohol in anything. But if you do, at least use a mild stimulant or a small amount of a stimulant, or something that is not respiratory depressive, because alcohol will accelerate Valium or something like that faster than you can imagine, and will put you on the grass.
You know,
and Valium these days is not fucking Valium, people, unless you've got a prescription, and doctors are so fucking few now actually prescribing it. It's not real Valium, unfortunately. It might even come in a packet, but please, people, it's not real Valium.
So yeah, seriously, go watch this harm reduction Al. He talks about this, and he's showing. He also goes through testing. So he's down in Bristol, and he goes through drugs that have been tested, that have been handed in with a loop as well, and what things are coming back. And he is showing, and this blew my mind, that the fact that these, as you say, what's being claimed to be sleeping tablets, Valium, diazepam, triazepam.
It became a problem when I was about 18, 19. And I remember in Washington, not far from here, I was dating a girl that lived there at the time, and on her estate, it was like 3-4 lads got dropped. There was 2 lads got dropped in the same night. And it was because what was happening, I laugh because I'd fucking cry otherwise, is what became, it's that shandy absinthe problem again. They were labelled as 10 milligrams. Blues, 10 milligram blues, everyone I know with fake slit, the designed to look like your standard pharmacological fucking benzodiazepine tablet, you know what I mean? It looks the part. Some of them would have, maybe 10 milligram. Some would maybe have 50. Some would maybe have 1, none. So what would happen is you get impatient, and because Valium is one of those drugs like, is it Percocet is the other one I'm thinking of? One of the American prescription drugs that you kind of forget you've taken it. And so because you're not getting the effect in a measured way that you did last time, because these ones might be all 6s, you get 2 zeros and you go, oh, fucking hell, these are crap, I'll take 4 more, and you've ended up taking 24 milligram. When do you know what I mean? It's all the different batching consistency. Yeah, it becomes a real problem that nobody, again, unless you are actively trying to kill yourself, and in which case, if you are, please seek help in whatever capacity you find capable to do so. Nobody takes drugs wanting to die. Nobody does. You do the best that you can in that moment to provide the information to yourself. But if you're in a cycle of destructive drug use or problematic drug use or addictive behaviors, you talk yourself out of it. Anybody, it's January, it's February now, you know what I mean? Anyone that promised themselves a diet after fucking New Year, how are you doing? How did your little voice in your head do, talking you into it, going, I want a bit of cake, come on, man, I'll hide this, I'll put it in the bottom of the bin. Think that times 100. Turned up to 11, depending on whatever fucking drugs that they are. Do you know what I mean? We're human creatures, we're fallible, we're vulnerable, and like you said, the more concentrated these drugs become, the more problematic that they have the potential to be. That's not to say they'll always be problematic to everybody. So a lot of people will go through life having no negative interactions with these things, except for maybe the law and prohibition, etc. But that doesn't mean that we should pretend that they don't exist. And I feel that the medical cannabis industrial complex is it's this savior, this miracle. We've invented this magical plant. 6 years ago, we came across this medicine, and it's like, no, first of all, like, no. And they're treating it as if that, like, it's been good for them people. They've managed to cobble together and bless their hearts. They did the best they could. Now the adults have got it. We'll show you what's cannabis. It's just so. And part of the healing is the community. Part of the healing is the growing. Part of the healing is being involved with other people, is being welcomed, is being seen, is being validated, is being welcomed, is not being told that you're weird because you want to smoke a joint and talk about space travel. Do you know what I mean? Or whatever the fuck your conversation comes out of your mouth.
Well, then we also need available. So we need everyone's needs met. Some people want to go to a doctor and have clinical guidance. That's what they want. That's what they feel comfortable, and that's what that makes them more accepting of it. And I think we need to have everything on the table. I don't think there needs to be one method.
Well, I don't think experienced, trained guidance. I think because there should be a difference between, because we have to be mindful of falling down the No, but we have to be careful of medicalizing all drugs, because then it can never happen. It'll just never fucking happen. People will always hedonistically, selfishly, self-destructively, in an exploratory way, in a rebellious way, take substances. Look how hard Russia went on fucking opioids and shit, and look at what happened with crocodile. Do you know what I mean? We've seen crocodile basically boil down bleach and various other chemicals injected into the body, and it eats away at the flesh, but it provides a similar triggering of the opioid receptors.
Ooh.
You wouldn't believe some of the drugs that people are taking around the world where prohibition is the worst. Prohibition increases the harms of substances and the harmful substances. So it becomes a thing of, I get what you're saying about that. If then people are in the medical paradigm or medicinal paradigm and want the guidance, that entirely should exist. I think the system shouldn't exist without it. I think it's irresponsible, frankly, that you have to pay £50 for 10 minutes of a doctor's time for them to go, you go to the place and you pay for all the kerfuffle and you get the thing. And if you don't know weed, you don't fucking know.
Well, we need more than one model for this. And that it needs to include everyone. Everything needs to be on the table.
But then, so I would argue, again, I'm going to go real back far to my childhood here. The building doesn't even exist. I drove past it the other year. So there used to be a co-op in Great Lumley. It is there, but it's now moved to the other side of the village. I remember vividly as a child, stood out there, £2, waiting for somebody to bring us 10 pack of Richmond Super Kings. We'd already got the Rocky, we'd got the skins. You know, we're going to rip off the roach off the skins, and all of us going around and building this fucking joint together. And the experience being as meaningful as the consumption. And ever since, like, I've kind of grown out of it now because I'm a lot less obsessive through self-regulation of my own routine or whatever else. I used to have a cash box. Some people may have known me long back in the day. I had a cash box meticulously organized. Meticulous. There'd be like these lighters, this thing, everything that is used in a certain function in a certain way. And I would go to war with an individual. I'd let 30 people come and rave in my house and party and fucking paint the walls and do whatever. But if you touch that box, hell will break loose, kind of thing. You know what I mean? That was my point of control within the universe. And that was my routine and that was my religion of it. And then when it became someone would come around, no matter who it was, as much as the British thing in me would go, put the kettle on. Teas would go down. Box would come out, joint would be rolled. That ceremony, that ritual, that thing of connect, like, patients don't have that. It's so self.
No, not all of them.
No, because you lawfully can't pass a joint. You can't then set up, and you can't lawfully pass your vaporizer to somebody else either. That's against the law. You can't do any of this. So I'm saying, my point is that, again, like, so I would then have my bit and they go, oh, I went to so-and-so. Oh, he's got the Cloud9 shit in, hasn't he? Yeah, dude. Oh, fucking hell, give me a go with that. Oh, what have you got? I've got some of the fucking, I'll go on and what? The whole thing, all of that's healing and something that can't be prescribed. That culture, that acceptance, that thriving of then literally next time you're at your dealer Dave and he goes, I've got some of the thing. Oh, Mikey, he's got the thing. Oh, do you know, like that? There's a whole thing there that cannot be replicated by the capitalist machine, that cannot be replicated by the medical cannabis industrial complex. They can try and take token gestures towards it, like we were saying before, like the 3.5s or things like that, but it isn't going to be the same thing. And no matter how good they make that thing, no matter how perfect, even if they could tap everything that I could ever think that could be wrong and make that system, there'll still be that outside of it. Do you know what I mean? There has to be that acceptance of this thing is going to be a fucking thing. And so if we can figure out how to not separate them in the sense of then, what's the word? Segregate them, but in the sense of going, well, how do we complement each other within them? So in the way now, like, I'm frustrated that if I was still to go to a venue, that I don't vape. I smoke. So I'm still then going to be prejudiced for smoking cannabis when somebody next to me could be vaping. Although actually saying that, there's a lot of venues in Durham are pretty damn good.
It's very much down to the venue, and it's very much down to the space.
It's a postcode lottery, the same as most things in this, unfortunately.
Yeah. I just think we've got to have everything on the table, and there isn't just one method. I just think everything has got to be open, and we can't just say this one way is the way of it going forwards. I mean, there's obviously different kinds of patients as well. I mean, you sort of spoke about earlier about flower not being available on the NHS. I agree. I don't think it should be. I think it should be on the NHS to make it much, much simpler. And what we're seeing, I mean, we obviously had this debate earlier this week, well, not this week, last week in the Houses of Parliament on medicinal cannabis. And what was really good to actually see is one of the MPs talking about it not just being THC and CBD. He actually spoke about this and was acknowledging that this is not just as simple as THC and CBD, which it seems to have been broken down to just into those. And what we're seeing with a lot of the studies that are coming through, there's one with Edinburgh at the moment, it's just isolate mixed with terpenes. How is that truly what this is? And we're not going to see the same effects.
The issue is the way the law is set under the 2018 guidance that is enacted under the 2001 misuse of drugs regulations that makes cannabis, when prescribed, a Schedule II drug, is that it is prescribed for a ratioed percentage of THC to CBD. Anything else is considered a contaminant, but is within accepted tolerance. And the problem comes from, as Kevin Jones brought up 3 weeks ago, however many weeks ago it was when he was sat here, it's about the controlled cannabinoids. It's about the fact that they've controlled all of the other cannabinoids. And it played into effectively the skunk narrative of 14% THC, less than 1% CBD, and then we're going, okay, well, what we're going to do is provide a ratioed thing that means it's not skunk, therefore street. And it's this, like I said, it's insane misconceptions. Like one of my mates who's a prolific, he's not offender, that's the opposite word of what I'm saying, victim of being pulled over by the police, got pulled over again the other night, and the cop that pulled him over was saying, of course we're going to swab you, if we'll swab you for THC, medical cannabis doesn't have THC in it.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
This is the fucking arresting officer. Like, it's...
Medical cannabis doesn't have THC in it? Jesus,
it's an insanity. Or then the thing that you hear from people, like, so what happened, do you remember, so I was... Ironically, and this is why I think it took me until an adult to get re-diagnosed as ADHD, because I was diagnosed as ADHD as a child, but at the height of the global movement in the 90s and the rise of fucking Ritalin. And so in the UK, there was like 10,000, whatever, plus kids. And then by the end of this storm, there was like hundreds of thousands of them sort of prescribed Ritalin. And the narrative that went alongside of this is, no, your child won't get high off these drugs, but if you took the drugs, you would get high because you don't have ADHD. That's not how these things work. It's still as somebody, like, I take amphetamine, and amphetamine focuses me, sets me just, I'm good and I'm chill. It's not a loss of self. It's a binding of what is normally a loss of self. Do you know what I mean? So the high then complements your personality in a different way. And so if you then have this thing by taking this, the high is what is benefiting you. But in an academic sense, you can't talk about that. It's in the same way that we've never codified drug-induced psychosis, because we'd have to then call drunk what it is, temporary psychosis. But we can't say that because we're not allowed these. We need there to be schizophrenia and psychosis and the boogeymen of somebody going crazy and the fucking prick Peter Hitchens, being like, well, cannabis is the reason violence and like, they need that narrative because they can't accept. I think were we even recording? No, it was before we were recording. I was saying about like Freud suffering from his own perceptual issues, as everybody does. You can only see the world from what you are, and if you not dumb enough. That's the wrong way of phrasing it. If you don't have, if you have the hubris and you don't have humility enough to recognize that they will by nature be different than you, I think the term is sonder, like the complexity and individuality of the human experience. They are everything that you haven't had. They have their version of. Like they're not just this NPC in the parlance of our days. I'm trying to think how I link this to the other fucking point. I've gone two layers deep. This is like Inception, and I've got lost. There was a point in there somewhere. But yeah, no, it's about accepting people, like you said, where they are and whatever else. And this is why I still will champion and support people with prescriptions and in the medical space. You know, I do it like 2 or 3 times a year now, just enough to keep me on. And that's because of the fucking NHS being like, well, fucking knock you off your list if you start taking drugs again. I'm like, wait, what? So if I get rid of this magic piece of paper, I'm a druggie. But if I have the piece of paper, I'm a patient. I'm like, yes. That's exploitation. That's racketeering. That's, you know what I mean? That's some bullshit, but okay, we'll play your game. But my point being, I still champion those people, even though I don't necessarily really benefit from that space, because I do want to see that if that is where you are, to use my analogy of the train station, if that is where you're stopping, I'm happy to lay the tracks so you can get to your destination. Just don't try and build the end of the tracks at your stop. And that's what I feel has happened, that a lot of people that are now have got really comfortable over the past 6 years and are like, oh, I can vape where I want, I can do what I want, I can travel wherever I want, I can... Yeah, you've got all of those privileges, and they are a privilege, not rights, because they will take them a fucking way in a moment's notice, or they can rather take it away at a moment's notice, because of the people that are still suffering. Whether you like it or not, unfortunately, you're reinforcing a paradigm that you good person, them bad person. You good weed, they're bad weed. And I can't, like I was saying with the NHS thing, of like the thing that comes to me in the quietness when I'm trying to find peace that worries me is, are the things that we are seeing that are being successful allowed to succeed because they are working towards the ends that they want to see? The grand, I don't mean the grand, like, but the pharmaceutical industry, the investor class, the people that have put trillions collectively into this over decades, with the medicalization, not just of cannabis, but like we said, of seeing of ketamine. I mean, in this country, £6,000, you can get a weekend's infusion of ketamine through private clinics.
In this country, I thought it was in Sweden.
Sure, it was in this country.
Oh, Switzerland.
Was it this country?
Yeah, it might be in this country now. Maybe wrong, but I was sure I'd seen that in Switzerland. It was one of the Northern European countries. I'm sure I saw that. But it must be
here. Royal free patients, private patients, ketamine infusions. Aftercare. Guide price. We offer a package for £1,302. Weird. Yeah, you book it like Cannabis Clinic. Like, here, let me share this for the audience to see this. This was 3 seconds of Googling. How the hell do I share this? You'd think after 162 episodes, I would understand how the hell you use this thing. Oh, it's the big button that says share.
Right help.
Yeah, that'll help. Bloody hell, man. I'm assuming people could see this. I don't know why it's gone small. I'm assuming you can see the screen anyway.
Yeah, hold down so you can see the top of it.
Yeah. So literally just first thing that came up, Ketamine Infusions UK. Book an appointment. Tells you all about it, you know, how long it'll take, how much time you'll need, 1 to 3 hours to complete, sort of aftercare. You won't be able to drive for 24 hours, etc. Yeah, guide price, 1,302. So it's even cheaper. $6,000 was what I was quoting. I've been quoting for years. So probably same with prescription cannabis costs. It's come down over time. But I'll share that link for people to look at. But yeah, there's other drugs that are coming up. You've got to remember what happened in 2018. I don't think it was necessarily 2018, but as part of cannabis being kind of allowed into this space, it created other potential space and avenues for other substances. It's just whether you can get then your prescribing doctor, your license holder, somebody with a fortified, like, what do you call it, logistics license to basically transport it, to hold it, etc. If you can satisfy all that criteria, and you've got like the medical side of it, yeah, you can set that system up. Yeah, it's it's all getting a bit different, like I said. But that's what I was trying to reference back to. You said about cannabis being a Class B earlier. One of the reasons that cannabis went from C to B under Jackie Smith and Gordon Brown and that lot was that they couldn't put it. They didn't want to put it back to a Class A because obviously the 2001 misuse of drug regulations was about creating pathways for research and development of drugs from substances that had potential therapeutic. And so the stuff in Schedule A wasn't considered therapeutic, so they weren't then looking at it. It was easier to get access to research and licensing for categories B and C drugs. So it's one of those interesting things, because then I think this is why then the ketamine argument recently of putting ketamine Class A, it's never going to happen. Like it went up to Class B 10 years ago? Some years ago it went up to a Class B anyway. But because, again, of this kind of thing, they're going to really struggle. This is why cannabis now sits under Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. Cannabis without a doctor's note, without a prescribed prescription, is Schedule 1. If you then have the prescription, it's a Schedule 2 drug. So it's magic. That weed, their magic weed, the capital M, capital C medical cannabis, when they use those terms, air quotes, that's what they're describing, is the process in which that paper makes that magic. So it has medicinal properties, not because the plant has medicinal properties, but because the paper says it's allowed to. And the language comes down to, it's in all of their replies to the petitions and stuff we've been putting up for a decade plus, which is no accepted medicinal value. Accepted. Remember, as again Riley brought up last week, it's the most studied plant in the history of the fucking planet. It's just not accepted. Remember the FDA, they've now got cannabis in their scheduling, Schedule 5 under Epidiolex, over-the-counter medication. You know what I mean? For like $32,000, $32,500, that's probably out of price as well. It's probably come down a little bit, but it's still an exorbitant amount of fucking money. In order to get that drug on their market, you could have, as I mentioned last week, 30,000 studies that fail and show no efficacy, but you have 2 that you've cherry-picked and maneuvered and worked out over time to, here you go, it's a medicine, it's a magic medicine. You sweep them under the rug. Yeah, look at it works. Perfect. And it's their systems. The drugs and everything, the access is becoming around this system, and it's becoming ever more corrupted as people are starting to see. We can make how much was that? 3 hours worth of work? I can make £1,000 from 3 hours worth of work just sitting with somebody off their face on Ket. They'll be in a K-hole. They won't even talk to me. This will be brilliant.
Like, that's going to cost you about 50 quid.
Yeah. You sat there with your coffee reading your novel. You're like, oh, is he all right? Yeah. You're just talking about Smurfs again. All right, yeah, it's fine. Like, do you know what I mean? These systems are fucked. And what really bothers me, and again, this is part of the reason I've been investigating for autism, is the injustice of it, the inequality of it, that it's just wrong. Like, if you can do that, I want to sniff cat in my home. I'm entitled to sniff cat in my home. Actually, we'd probably have better methods of access and whatever, like you said, unless you know to spit, etc. But to consume these drugs, then, you know what I mean? If in these settings it can be done for profit, I should be able to do it in my own home. That's the main hypocrisy that I draw with all of this, regardless of licensing, legislation, scheduling, any of the superfluous shit. The idea that you are calling some of it medical and medicine and some of it not, and I knowing the science boils my piss. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, no, you are lying. You are openly, actively lying. And because the treats that you supply to enough people are so good, you know what I mean? These doctors that were approaching, no offense to any of these doctors, that were approaching retirement anyway, that are then told, do you not want to make some extra kickback? We know you like to play golf in exotic locations. Do you not need some extra money for that? Do you want a new Lexus? You know, couldn't be one of our prescribers. I'm not thinking of any particular ones in here. There are obviously a lot of young people involved, but I think that their motivations are still along the same vein. They just have more to offer in the same way. If you're a brand, if you can get a consumer in young enough, then they'll be addicted for life. I think if you get these doctors in feeling like, I am God, I'm the new generation that gets to prescribe ketamine and cannabis, and I'm the cool doctor. Yeah. Like, of course they're going to fight and work within that paradigm and completely, they can never see the drugs thing, because did any of them really take drugs other than one night at university? They maybe sniffed a little line of cocaine. They maybe had a little toot of the cannabis, but they've got a test tomorrow, so they were like, no, I don't want to touch that. Like I want drug culture people leading the reintegration of drug people. You can have all the academia. We need the science. We need all the science. We need all of the proof of concepts from that realm, because that is what is taken serious. But we also need to recognize that the reason there are no third spaces and nightlife is fucking being obliterated everywhere you look
Yeah,
is because most people take other fucking drugs, and if you don't make spaces for people to take those drugs, why do you think everyone wants to at festivals? Because you let them take drugs openly with other people. That's why they become ever more popular. That's the playground to go take drugs with and explore with and to experiment with. It used to just be the play park, and you could take acid on a Sunday afternoon knowing there'd be nobody in the play park all afternoon but you and your mates. Or like you said, you could go wandering around some farmer fields on mushrooms. You respect the space to do the thing, whereas now the only space to do that thing is the festival, and that is ever more 400-500 quid to get into that field. Like, it's then become a class thing. So then what are the cheapest drugs that become accessible? Well, ketamin's still, what, 20 quid a gram? You know, amphetamines still really cheap.
It's a tenner a gram.
It's got even cheaper. I was going to say, it fluctuates, but again, I suppose it's supply and demand.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then what drugs then become popular amongst the youth versus then I suppose the one thing that kind of bucks this argument is cocaine, but then it's about the quality of the cocaine that the lower classes are getting with their stepped on 3 for a ton or whatever, compared to your ton gram of matey boy. You know what I mean? They're very different products.
I am going to reserve.
I have not in any which way implied, and I hope nobody infers, your history or potential history thereof of drug use. I'm speaking generally of Northerners in my own personal experience.
Yeah, I'm as you said earlier, it's protecting those people that you can sort of tell the full story of. So I can't even start telling some story because it's going to be hard to. It gets difficult to sort of.
But for GDPR purposes, should we move on then?
Yes, sorry.
No, it's quite all right.
Lots more, as I say, to talk about on this subject, and I don't think that the type of drugs between classes are different. I do not at all. I think they are all the same, and sometimes you have and I think we've spoke about this in the past, of this classist kind of issue that isn't there as much as I am guilty of it as well, very guilty of it. But you've got to ask yourself, why do people want to take the drugs? What are they soothing for? What is it they're wanting to escape? Why are we not dealing with the actual problem? And this is what sort of circulating back round to, obviously, this kid that I'd come across, one of my son's friends, they're obviously in social care, and well, not obviously, but they were in social care. So I had interactions with their social workers as well. And what was apparent was they were not dealing with why he was doing this. They were dealing with that he was doing it. And that was the problem. He was doing it, not actually coming back to, well, the kid's lonely. The kid's lonely.
But part of the problem is now, I completely agree. And the issue is now that who isn't lonely? Who isn't neurotic? Who isn't narcissistic? And I say this as myself, as in everybody, like, what has happened to us because of social media and technology and the impact of society, we struggle. I'm a very empathetic person. I remember on the Melanie Sykes episode, I was talking about fucking nearly crashing a car to save a squirrel sort of jobby. Like, but I still struggle, like you said, with that kind of thing, that I still have my classism. I try really hard to keep it there, and I challenge it, and in quieter moments I'll look at it and, readdress it. And as I get older, I do get more understanding of just, I can't understand this person, but I'm not meant to, so I'll be more forgiving of not understanding, if you know what I mean. What I was sort of alluding to in the drugs thing, everyone is escaping the same thing. It's a sense of detachment. It's a loss of purpose. It's a loss of hope and future vision. I often speak of this concept of like mythos, this collective idea of myth, of narrative, that we don't have one in sort of like guess the Nietzschean sense of God is dead without then the structure of religion. That's why you're seeing fundamental ideals in religion sort of re-emerging in certain areas. And then people going more towards the concept of like spirituality, and people falling into ever more niche online community groups and whatever else, is that they're seeking a collective story, the boundaries, to understand what is the bounds of their life and their position in society. They're looking to use others as a mirror to understand who they are. But the more closed off and less diverse your group is, the more of a funhouse mirror that becomes to you, and you can't see who you are. So you become more, you try and fit and contort yourself into being this false image of who you are. Whereas when you're forced into, as we were speaking of before, if we can leave a part of ourselves and all come together in the middle, it gives you more things, like the loss of physical space of working. I'm not necessarily advocating for office work here, but the culture that creates. You've got to sit next to the guy that on Twitter you'd call a bigot, but at work no one's going to talk about any of the things that would make you do that or interact like that. You may even laugh at his jokes. You may even be interested in his kids or looking at his dog's pictures or whatever, as in pictures of his dog, not the pictures his dog took, although I really would be interested in the pictures his dog took. But my point is that that's what we used to have. That was what the pub was. That was what rave culture was. Free parties were. That was the culture that turned me from a very violent, angry, righteously so because of my upbringing, kid, into somebody that went, nah, man, these people, it's in them, it's in me, and it's in them. I don't know what the fuck it is, and I still don't know what the fuck it is, but I'm following it. And in those moments, like we had before, where I could have and should have, and I'm grateful for you checking me. That's me revisiting that. And I haven't had that experience in decades. But if the culture hadn't evolved the way it has for us to spend 10 hours a day in a phone and it'd be normal, we'd have more infrastructure, park benches, open spaces. That's what I'm doing with hemp gardens. Like you said, I want people to come and consume that space. I got a beautiful comment on Instagram the other day of somebody that goes down there quite often saying, I just went down there for a nice quiet joint, as I do. And some young'uns came down and sort of drinking, throwing litter around. And I went over and just said, this is like a safe space that's been like created for all of us to kind of use. And if we don't respect it, we don't keep it. And you've seen that they understood. They picked up the shit. They went and took it to the bin. Like different cultures of people, quite an alternative person. And by the sounds of the people he's depicted, some of the kids off the estate, which I've got no qualms with, but they are not as, I don't want to say culturally literate because that sounds so classist. What the hell am I trying to describe here? It's not important for them to be respectful. Part of their identity is to be disrespectful because that's how they stay safe in their environment. They need to be loud and proud and whatever, fuck you, because that's what stops them being the victim of bad things in their culture. So I can understand and empathize that behavior. As I said, I had a lot of that in me as a youth. But to then see that just a simple interaction from another peer, not a person of authority or whatever, resulted in such a thing. I think that's what the third space does, whether it's titrating drug use like we spoke of with the pubs and that before, whether it's then sharing harm reduction advice as we've spoken of, whether it's then giving people access to drugs that are actually the right drugs as we spoke of. I'm surmising this really well here. They all come down and around to the same thing, that the nightlife, as you were speaking of, as well, the third space. There has to be something outside of the freedom of my home and the freedom of you and yours and the limitations of society for us to express ourselves in a creative way. I think part of the rejection of LGBT movement is other people from other disparate cultures and backgrounds that are lawfully and culturally not allowed to be proud. So when they see this group being venerated and celebrated year on year, it's created this backlash of people that go, well, why am I not allowed to be accepted in society? Why am I not allowed? And so they become resentful of those that are celebrated. There's a wonderful clip that's just played through my head there. It's going to be quite esoteric, but Malcolm in the Middle. One of the Malcolm in the Middle episodes, Lois, Malcolm's mum, is at the military academy for Francis. I'm surprised I actually know as many details as I do off this top of my head. And she's talking to him. They're drinking one night, talking about disciplinary techniques. And she goes, have you ever tried just random... I've mixed up the drinking thing. That's for a different episode that involves them. But they're talking about disciplinary techniques. And she goes, have you ever just randomly started praising one of them? She's talking about her 4 boys at home. He's obviously in reference to the cadets at the military academy. And he goes, no, this is interesting. Why? Because it drives them crazy. They don't understand why they're getting special privilege. The one who's got the privilege doesn't understand either, so they start acting in line in accordance to you because you've given them that space, so they don't want to offend or upset you. And the others, then they start to turn and fight on themselves, and then they become resentful of the other one, and then they start to model their behaviour on the others that are being celebrated. And it's just an interesting sort of play of, like I said, what I was describing there. And I think that if we can get beyond not just this drug supremacy argument, going, oh, weeds are now okay with the paper, ketamine's okay if you go pay those guys, DMT's okay if it's a trial for King's College, or you can take MDMA if you go to this country, you can do that. Like, no. Like, you need to invite that behaviour back in, because more people than ever are taking drugs. There are more drugs than ever in society. There are more chances and more accessibility than ever before, yet there isn't the social titration. That's a good way of describing it. There isn't responsible elders. There isn't the myth of a better world. So people, instead of taking the drugs to amplify the experience, I'm going to remember this forever when I get old in life. And like, no, like, we're told the world's going to end in 2 minutes. We're told that the sea level will rise 7,000 feet, that the world's going to burn every square inch of things, that, you know, the ice will be, like, I'm catastrophizing and talking bull, but you get what I'm saying? Like, we're told there is no future. And you wonder why then people are so self-destructive. You wonder why they're hedonistic, not in the sense of self-exploration, but in self-destruction. It's because we don't have this. We don't have, then, like I said, elders or champions, people to look up to, idols in our community. The people who are our idols are all billionaires, whether it be Rihanna or Jay-Z or fucking Trump or fucking Musk or Peter Thiel. I don't know why they're all American, but they're the only ones I can think of off the top of my head. But you know what I mean? Like, we're told to idolize money and success, which represents then security and the ability to do whatever the fuck you want. Because I can drive in that bus lane, I can afford the fine. I can park there and afford the fine. I can smoke in this hotel room, I can afford the fine. Like, it creates that disparate, like, the separation between them, so people aspire to get that thing because they're the ones who are rewarded. Whereas if we can have, again, social acceptance of each other, going, you know what, I don't like you fucking smoking that weed over there, but you're cleaning up that park, to reference again hemp garden, you know what I mean? It's like we if they call us bad people for taking the drugs, people will then become representative of what they are told that they are, if you don't give them the opportunity to be good drug consumers, responsible drug consumers.
Well, that's the key. Having been the person who's had to mop up the mess, there are times where I've thought, yeah, I can see why prohibition seems to be the easiest answer.
But we're living in prohibition and you're still mopping up that mess.
I can see how that is the easy solution to the problem.
Mm. That is, in theory, but not practice, I would say. Because again, it makes logical sense. People take this thing, these things happen. Well, if they didn't do that thing, it'd be fine. It's like, oh my God, this person's banging their head off the wall and they've got all these concussions. We don't ban the walls. We go, why are you banging your head on the wall? Oh,
no,
right.
They don't. No. They don't. And that's the problem. And that was my point, is they're not asking why. They're not getting to why and dealing with that of you know, occupying your time with something that's got meaning, giving you purpose in life.
It's that pursuit of mastery. Connor McLeod speaks of this quite highly, Kahneman, that, finding something that you can get incrementally better at, that you can look back in retrospect and see the work that you've done. If that then can also correlate to social good, to individual growth and good, all the better. If you can then share that with others, even better. And it's then the humbling through arriving at truly mastering. It's not the Dunning-Kruger effect of, I know everything about this thing, me. Like, no, you actually know that shit, so you don't shout about that shit. Do you know what I mean? It's you arrive at being humble and having a mastery of something often go hand in hand. You think of, like, the martial artist expert from, like, a 70s Kung Fu movie, and you've got the cocky kid being like, rah, yeah. There's like a quiet master, and he goes to kick him or something, and he just takes him out in one bat. That's what I mean. Of, like, what we're told is that is growth to us is the numbers on the screen. Oh, I've got more followers this week. I've grown. You haven't taken a bath in 3 days, mate. Yeah, but look, 1,000 more subscribers. Like, do you know what I mean? the digital realm, the illusory self that we create through social media, this presence, this idolized self, is become far more important to us than the physical self. And I think we're going to have an epidemic, not just in the UK, but globally, of all kinds of weird health conditions that are going to come back because we're not doing basic shit. Like, the one thing I think Jordan Peterson's ever said that makes any fucking sense is make your bed, is tidy your space. Like I was saying before about routine, the routine has been God to me. Like, actually being able to get up every day, do yoga, like, as anyone that's followed my Instagram and seen the continuity of my posts recently, that little routine of being able to get up, have my coffee, have my joint, do my shit, sets me for the day. No matter what the evening has been, no matter what the day holds, that's me centering myself. Whereas before I would have gone, oh, I'm 3 fat blunts, you know what I mean? I'm doing X, Y, Z. I found the combination, the way, the method that works for me, and it may look like madness to another in the same way that this teens use may look like madness to you, and in some ways it is, but to them there is some form of logic to it and rationale. And I think, like you said, we need to find out why they're banging their heads, and I think they're already telling us why they're banging their heads, because they can't put the phone down. And I say that as someone that struggles to put the phone down. Until we incentivize this space to be better and more stimulating than this thing, and that requires restricting that thing in some which way and turning up this so we get more interested in this space. And I think, frankly, we need another, like, summer of love. We need drugs. We need a wave of free parties and people taking drugs together from all kinds of classes, backgrounds, colours, creeds, to suddenly recognise the commonality of each other. Because since fucking lockdowns, we are so broken on our own little islands, so sure of ourselves.
I think we see something more. I actually think it's... Look what happened when we had World War II. People had to grow their own food. That mass kind of crisis that happened in the country actually brought communities together more. And I think we need something a lot more than just a summer of love. I think there needs to be some real catastrophic change.
We almost need like a solar flare that knocks out the technology, because I guarantee you, if we had Twitter and everything and all the technology, people would have happily sat. The first infrastructure that would have been rebuilt after the Blitz was the internet. People wouldn't care about the houses or the parks or the communities or whatever. It's like, can we get back online?
Yeah. I mean, what age were you at when you started going online? What was, just sort of get that gist of, I mean, do you ever remember going
2000, 2001? Yeah. I was a pre-internet, pre-phone and pre-internet kid. So I remember getting my first phone was a BT Cellnet, the black one with the pull-up aerial, and that was one of the first like mass-marketed 2G phones. And it was like, oh, it's got integrated SMS messaging, and then we were like the text generation and the clickety clacks, and that changed shit, but we had control of that. It was the same when we had that, like Napster, and then like Bebo or early MySpace.
Yeah,
these were resources that were Web 1.0. They hadn't figured out how to commercialize these things. You had Amazon and eBay and stuff starting to come together and whatever, but that was way over there and very few people used it. But these were just services where you connected with others and there was no financial incentive. So you literally built your MySpace page, and here's my top 8 friends, and oh, you can learn code here. We want you to actively change the fonts and express yourself and add in songs and change this and do this. And so we texted each other, literally be like, where are you? They'd express back, boom, phone goes back in pocket. You go find them. You never touch the phone again. Maybe your mum rings because it's 10 o'clock at night and you fuck. Oh, sorry, I forgot to come back.
For me, it was the landline.
We started with landlines, and then it just got to a point of we basically just check your 5 spots. The village was small enough. You go knock, not in, ask mum, where'd he go? He says he's gone, blah, blah. Yeah, he's lying, he ain't going there. So where's he really gone? All right, I'll go check that spot. Oh, he's not there, I'll go to the other spot. And then you do a few loops around, and then you got all right, fuck this, I'll go see other mate. And then you go, oh, he's not there. And along the way, you find something to do. You find other people. That in and of itself, the pursuit of the thing is fulfilling, even if you don't getting the thing. And we've lost that because of instant gratification. The distance between the anticipation of the thing and getting the thing has been lessened. And we know through anthropological studies that the anticipation of a thing neurologically fires so much more in our brain than getting the thing. Getting the thing is the come down, the bottom. That's the other side of it. The excitement of building to the thing. Look at a fucking child waiting for something, and they're just like we've fucked that mechanism. Like we we're talking about with cannabinoids, we burnt out those receptors. It's the same with like the comparison narcissism mechanism. Again, we all have. It's just the dial's been turned up because of social media. All of us before will have cared to a nominal degree about our appearance and how we act and how we whatever else in the meat space. But now the validation you could get from that, you can only see so many people in a day. But 1 million people could see the selfie. So again, it's where the priorities and the energy and the effort has gone, but this is into an intangible thing that if it disappears, what have you really got? What have you learned? If the power went off tomorrow, do you know how to make fire? Do you know how to stay warm? Do you know do you have enough logic and sense of self that you could survive a couple of days in a pandemic, in a problem, that there was no news, there was no information, there was just you and the people around you? Like, that's what fucking worries me, is we're not, did you have some old people that remember the Blitz or whatever? Maybe not so much actually these days.
No.
But we're not actually, so it'd be the kids of them that, grandma used to say X, Y, Z as their grandparents, would maybe be able to direct some stuff. Some of the younger people would try and sort of take roles, but we need community leaders, we need champions, we need things outside of the official system that works alongside of it, and we don't currently have that, partly because of the war on drugs, taking out the community leaders, taking out people that otherwise spoke against authority, that otherwise championed for collective ideals. You know, we live under Thatcher's Britain, in which she said, you know, once the society doesn't exist, there is only families of men, women, and children, or individuals of men, women, and children, I think was the quote. And we need to rebuild community. I think, if anything, that would be the bullet point of this this podcast. I've got one more sort of cheeky question, which is just a lighter question to end the podcast, and then I'll let you go. What's currently growing or is planned to be growing in the greenhouse of love this year?
At the moment, nothing. Well, no, I've got some spider plants in there at the moment that I moved out. Before Christmas, George decided to make a bit of an appearance. Last year was not a good year for him. He kicked me about a bit, and I became a bit more lazy with it. But I'm intending this year to do what I did at the beginning of last year, is get seeds going. So again, I'm being self-sufficient, not going down to B&Q and buying a load of pre-sown seeds that are already plants that I just put into the ground. No, I'm taking them right from the seed all the way through. And that was one of the things I achieved last year. I'm debating this year. I'm going to get rid of quite a lot this year as well. I'm going to cut quite a few things down just for a change. I've got a big willow plant that I need to cut down because it's just taken over. It's gone a bit insane. I've got some white sage in there at the moment. But this was one to ask you as well. I meant to ask you about the spider plants. Do your cats eat spider plants?
Yeah, I mean, Neo's like 18 now, so he doesn't really have an interest in the house plants. But Morpheus, he loves snake plants, spider plants, cannabis plants, evidently. What was the other one that he's been nibbling on recently? Jade plants?
The softer leaf ones, they've left my snake plant alone, the mother-in-law's tongue. That's been left alone. But the spider plants eat them. And apparently they get high on it, and that's why they eat it.
Wouldn't surprise me. It really wouldn't surprise me, because it's always the thing of he sits on the back of the couch and he's like nibbling the ones on the windowsill, and I'm like, stop it. And then he's like,
apparently
getting dirty.
Has the same effect as catnip. It's very similar.
Would make sense. I remember the day, I'll make this sort of the last anecdote and we'll wrap up. Because kittens there's a certain point where catnip receptors don't kick in. So then after, I think it's about 6 months, the catnip suddenly is a thing to them. And so I tried to put it down one day, and Neo obviously goes batshit crazy still for catnip. So he was like all up in that. And the kitten's like, don't know what you fussed about, just going over to him like, what are you doing? What the fuck is this? And then like one day, I think the week after, I put it down, and something, you just saw it, and the first time it kind of went, and his eyes went, and his whole body, and he's so like gangly and flimsy anyway with him. I think he's got a something joint thing where basically he's like almost like double jointed effectively.
Hyper hyperextension, is it?
Yes, yeah. And so he's just flinging himself and going fucking crazy, and it's just like okay, and you can see like it's such a natural thing to want to alter your consciousness, to want to enjoy and play with the experience of being alive. It can get quite monotonous to be conscious, especially at our level as humans. So yeah, to be able to play with it and to be able to be introspective of yourself through these substances, I think is not just a rite of passage, not just a basic human right, but I think is something that is fundamental to the evolution of the human race and to the rebuilding of the physical space that has been absent now for 20 years under the techno-industrial revolution.
And on that note,
spit your ketamine, folks. All right. It's been a pleasure. I have enjoyed this. Yeah, thank you very much, Callie. I'll let you get off and I'll do my usual housekeeping and we'll share this onto the airwaves next week and see how people digest it. I've really appreciated your candor and your honesty as always. And yeah, that was good. I enjoyed that.
good, glad. We went all over, and it's nice to talk about some of the other things that gets a bit boring sometimes talking about cannabis. Well, no, we do it all the time.
It's second nature to us. This conversation I've had to think, and when I have to think, I enjoy it very much. So yeah, no, I think it's been good. I think people will enjoy it. Where can people keep an eye on you if they wanted to? Not that they're going to come and find you. Where are you public?
Instagram's probably the one that I use the most. I need to get my Instagram at Dr Callie Seaman is probably the best place to get me. I need to get more active on social media. But
you would do well on TikTok, I feel. Maybe speak to Riley. She speaks very highly of you. We had a lovely conversation off the record, after we recorded. And yeah, I think if you reached out to her, do look on a TikTok. Honestly, it's a platform that's very responsive to the kind of things that you would want to put out. Like,
I tried TikTok and it shut down my posts very quickly, very, very quickly. Even just for there was a leaf on there. So I fell out with that one and became very conscious of how social media is affecting my mood if I don't get the respect. Well, not don't get the respect. I realised I had an addiction to it and had to go, real world, just exactly what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, Instagram if you want to get me. I'm on LinkedIn if you need me and all. But I am going to start doing more. I am going to get my shit together.
Good. I'll keep pestering you. All right. I'll include that in the links below. Sweet. We'll say goodbye here then, and I will do the other bits shortly. All right. Catch you later. Peace and love. Bye. Well, there you go, folks. That was Dr. Callie Seaman. Hope you enjoyed that. It was good to get her back on as always, catch up with her. It was nice to talk about a lot of other things other than just cannabis this time. It's good to have a candid conversation about harm reduction, other drugs. It was good to talk about sort of what she's been doing with the nightlife, how we can sort of reintegrate and reconnect people into sort of the meat space, as it were, the physical realm. It was good to touch on sort of some I can't even speak, some synthetics, other sort of potential problems within sort of the drug space. Always good to provide some good education and information to y'all fine folks. Touched on hydro a little bit, touched on the medical cannabis industrial complex a little bit there. Hope you enjoyed it. If you really did, please do give us a like, share, a subscribe, a thumbs up, a star, whatever it is on your platform that you enjoy this podcast on. I appreciate you doing so and appreciate the action. So thank you. If you really, really enjoyed this, please check us out on patreon.com/Simpa Life, where for less than a cup of coffee a month, you can help me keep the lights on. This little project of mine. Check out simpalife.com for more back catalogue of articles and information and resources. Check out my latest on German politics in Weed World that is out now. You've been wonderful. I will catch y'all next week with someone. It'd be awesome. You'll love it. I'll love it. All right. Peace and love, folks.